In the fog-choked alleys of London, a cryptic letter lands on Hercule Poirot's desk, whispering of a shadowy cabal known only as the Big 44 masterminds, weaving a global web of chaos. Who are these elusive puppeteers? Diplomats, blood spills in Whitechapel, a coded cipher pointing to Paris. From the glittering galas of France to the opium dens of Shanghai, Poirot and Captain Hastings chase clues through a world teetering on the edge Rio's vibrant carnivals, Moscow's spicy intrigues, Tokyo's neon-lit conspiracies, and Buenos Aires' fiery revolutions. Each step unveils a new face of the Big Four, a charismatic diplomat, a ruthless financier, a cunning warlord, and a reclusive genius. But as the trail leads to a fortified chateau in Geneva, one question burns. Can Poirot outwit the greatest criminal minds of the age before their plan to reshape the world ignites global catastrophe? Packed with suspense, betrayal, and relentless pursuit, The Big Four is a high-stakes game where every move could be Poirot's last. Will he checkmate the shadows or become their final pawn? Chapter 1. The Shadow in London. The fog clung to London like a conspirator's cloak, thick and unyielding, muffling the clatter of hooves and the distant rumble of omnibuses. It was late November, and the city seemed to hold its breath as if it sensed the weight of secrets stirring in its underbelly. Hercule Poirot, impeccably dressed despite the damp chill, adjusted his Homburg hat and tapped his silver-tipped cane against the cobblestones of Baker Street. His small, precise steps echoed faintly, a metronome in the haze, as he made his way toward his modest but elegant apartment. Inside, the fire crackled, casting a warm glow across the room's polished mahogany and neatly arranged bookshelves. Captain Arthur Hastings, Poirot's loyal friend and occasional chronicler, lounged in an armchair, a newspaper splayed across his lap. The headlines screamed of diplomatic tensions and economic unease, but Hastings' attention drifted. His eyes half closed in the comfort of the hearth's warmth. "Mon ami," Poirot said, his voice sharp yet melodious. Slicing through the quiet, "You read the papers, yet you see nothing. The world, it turns, and in its turning there are shadows." Hastings blinked, sitting upright. "Shadows, Poirot. You're being cryptic again. What's got you so wound up?" Poirot's mustache twitched, a subtle sign of his agitation. He crossed to his desk, where a single letter lay, its envelope pristine save for a faint smudge of ink. "This," he said, holding it aloft, "arrived this morning. No postmark, no signature, yet it speaks of matters most grave." Hastings took the letter, his curiosity piqued. The paper was heavy, expensive, the words typed with mechanical precision. "M. Poirot. The game is afoot. For players unseen, move pieces across the globe. Their aim, chaos. Their means, limitless. The first move is made in London, tonight, in the shadow of the Rook. Trust no one." A friend Hastings frowned, rereading the cryptic lines. The Rook sounds like a chess reference. And who's this friend? Some crackpot, surely. Poirot's green eyes gleamed. "Nan," Hastings. "This is no jest. The Rook, it is a clue, a place. In London, it suggests a tower, a fortress. Perhaps the Tower of London itself, or—" He paused, his mind racing. "No, it is too obvious. The Rook is a symbol, a code name for a place of power, of secrecy. We must think, mon ami, and quickly." Before Hastings could reply, a sharp rap at the door startled them both. Poirot's hand tightened on his cane, and he gestured for Hastings to answer. The visitor was a young messenger boy, his cap askew, his breath fogging in the cold air that followed him in. "Telegram for Mr. Poirot," the boy said, thrusting forward a slip of paper before scurrying back into the fog. Poirot unfolded the telegram, his expression darkening as he read aloud. "Whitechapel, midnight. Raven's Alley, the Rook Falls. Signed, a friend, Whitechapel," Hastings said, his voice tinged with unease. "That's a rough part of town. And Raven's Alley, never heard of it." "Nor I," Poirot admitted. "But the little grey cells, they stir. This is no coincidence. The letter, the telegrams there, threads in a tapestry, woven by a hand most cunning. We must go, Hastings, to this Raven's Alley, and see what game is played." The clock struck 11 as Poirot and Hastings stepped into the fog-choked streets of Whitechapel. The air was heavy with the scent of coal, smoke, and damp earth, and the gaslights flickered like wary sentinels. Poirot, wrapped in a dark overcoat, moved with purpose, his cane clicking rhythmically. Hastings, less at ease, kept a hand near the revolver in his pocket, his eyes scanning the shadows. "Poirot," he whispered, "this feels like a trap. We don't even know what we're looking for." "Patience, mon ami," Poirot replied, his voice low. "The trap it is set, but for whom? We are not the prey, I think, but the hunters. Observe, listen, and the truth will reveal itself." They found Raven's Alley after a labyrinthine trek through Whitechapel's warren of streets, guided by a surly publican who pointed them to a narrow, unlit passage off Cable Street. The alley was a slit in the city's flesh, its walls slick with damp, its cobblestones uneven underfoot. At its far end, a single gas lamp cast a feeble glow, illuminating a figure slumped against the wall. Hastings froze, his hand tightening on his revolver. "Poirot, look calm, Hastings." Poirot murmured, advancing with measured steps. The figure was a man, middle-aged, dressed in a tailored but blood-stained suit. His eyes stared blankly into the fog, a thin line of crimson trickling from his throat. Poirot knelt, his gloved fingers probing the man's pockets with clinical precision. "A diplomat, perhaps," Poirot said, extracting a leather wallet. "His papers identify him as Sir Reginald Vane, attached to the Foreign Office. But this—" He held up a scrap of paper, its edges charred, covered in a scrawl of numbers and symbols. Hastings leaned closer, squinting. "Looks like gibberish. Code. A cipher," Poirot said, his voice tinged with excitement, "and one most intricate. This man, he was no ordinary diplomat. He carried secrets, and someone ensured he would not share them." A sudden clatter echoed from the alley's mouth, and Hastings spun, drawing his revolver. A shadow darted across the street, swallowed by the fog. After him, Hastings shouted, but Poirot grabbed his arm. "Non, Hastings, the killer is gone, and pursuit is futile in this mist. Our answers lie here, with Sir Reginald and his cipher." They returned to Baker Street, the dead man's body left in the care of a summoned constable. In the quiet of Poirot's study, he spread the coated paper on his desk, his eyes darting over the symbols. Numbers intertwined with Greek letters and arcane sigils. A puzzle that seemed to defy logic. "Hastings," Poirot said, "fetch me the Bradshaw's Guide and a map of Paris. This cipher, it is not merely a message, it is a map, a guide to the next move in this shadow war." "Paris," Hastings said, bewildered, as he retrieved the requested items. "How do you know?" Poirot tapped the paper. "The numbers, they correspond to coordinates, and the Greek letters alpha, beta, gamma suggest a sequence. When aligned with the streets of Paris, they point to a specific location, the place, Vend, and this symbol." He indicated a stylized rook, etched in red ink. "It confirms our letter's warning. The Big Four, they make their move in Paris." Hastings rubbed his temples. But who are these Big Four? And why kill a diplomat too? "Send a message." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "The Big Four, mon ami, are not mere criminals. They are architects of chaos, manipulators of nations. Sir Reginald, I suspect, was their pournoir, their enemy. His death is a warning, but also a mistake. They have revealed their hand, and Poirot, he does not ignore such a challenge." The next morning, Poirot and Hastings sat in a first-class carriage bound for Dover. The train's rhythm a counterpoint to Poirot's restless thoughts. The fog had lifted, but a sense of unease lingered. Hastings, flipping through a newspaper, paused at a small article buried on page 7. "Diplomat found dead in Whitechapel." "Police baffled, Poirot," he said. "This doesn't mention the cipher or the Big Four. Do you think the police know anything?" "They know nothing," Poirot said dismissively. "The police, they see a murder. Poirot sees a war. This cipher, it is our weapon, and Paris is our battlefield." As the train neared Dover, Poirot's attention drifted to the window, where the English countryside blurred past. A memory surfaced, unbidden. A case years ago, a whispered rumor of a secret cabal pulling strings behind Europe's thrones. He had dismissed it as myth, but now, with Sir Reginald's blood on his hands, he wondered, could the Big Four be real? A quartet of masterminds orchestrating global discord. At Dover they boarded a steamer for Calais, the sea choppy and grey. Hastings, ever prone to seasickness, clutched the rail, while Poirot stood resolute, his mind dissecting the cipher's intricacies. The place Vendome, a hub of wealth and power, was no random choice. Prip suggested wealth, influence, perhaps a member of the Big Four hiding in plain sight. "Hastings," Poirot said, turning from the rail, "in Paris. We must be as the chameleon, blending yet observant. The Big Four, they expect us to follow. But they do not expect Hercule Poirot." Hastings managed a weak smile. "You're enjoying this, aren't you?" "Enjoy?" Poirot's mustache twitched. None, mon ami. I am compelled. Order, method, these are my creed. The Big Four, they threaten the very fabric of civilization, and that I cannot allow. As the steamer docked in Calais, a figure watched from the shadows of the pier, a cigarette glowing faintly in the dusk. Poirot did not see him, but he felt the weight of eyes upon them, a silent challenge in the gathering dark. The game was be indeed afoot, and in Paris the next move awaited. In Paris the air was crisp, the streets alive with the clatter of horse-drawn carriages and the chatter of café patrons. Poirot and Hastings checked into a discreet hotel near the Place Vendôme. Its facade unassuming, but its rooms luxurious enough to suit Poirot's refined tastes. Over a dinner of coq au vin, Poirot outlined his plan. "The cipher points to a gala tomorrow night," he said, swirling a glass of Bordeaux. "A grand event at the Hôtel de Vendôme, attended by diplomats, financiers, and aristocrats. One of them, I believe, is our rook who knows where to find him." Hastings frowned. "But how do we get in? We're not exactly on the guest list." Poirot's eyes twinkled. "Mon ami, you underestimate the power of a well-placed word. I have already secured invitations, courtesy of an old friend in the street. We shall attend as Belgian investors, seeking opportunities in Paris's glittering world." The next evening Poirot, resplendent in a tailored tuxedo, and Hastings, slightly uncomfortable in his borrowed finery, stepped into the Hôtel de Vendôme's grand ballroom. Crystal chandeliers cast a golden glow over the crowd, their jewels and silks a dazzling contrast to the fog of London. Poirot's eyes scanned the room, cataloguing faces, gestures, the subtle tells of deceit. "There," he whispered, nodding toward a tall man with a silver-streaked beard, holding court near a marble fountain. "Count Victor Rostov, a Russian émigré with ties to half the governments in Europe." His name appeared in Sir Reginald's wallet, a connection too precise to be chance. Hastings followed Poirot as they wove through the crowd, pausing to exchange pleasantries with a French duchess and a German industrialist. Rostov's laughter boomed, but his eyes were sharp, darting to Poirot as if sensing a predator. Poirot, undeterred, approached with a disarming smile. "Count Rostov," he said, bowing slightly. "Hercule Poirot, at your service. I am told you are a man of vision, with interests that span continents." Rostov's smile was thin, his accent polished. "Monsieur Poirot, your reputation precedes you. But I am merely a humble investor, seeking stability in these turbulent times." "Stability," Poirot mused, "is a rare commodity. Tell me, have you heard of a group called the Big Four? Rumors suggest they seek quite the opposite." Rostov's hand froze on his champagne flute, a flicker of unease crossing his face. "A myth, surely," he said, recovering quickly. "The world is full of such tales." "Perhaps," Poirot said, his tone light but his eyes piercing. "Yet myths often hide truths, do they not?" Before Rostov could reply, a commotion erupted near the ballroom's entrance. A young woman, her gown torn, stumbled in, her face pale with terror. "He's dead," she cried, collapsing into a waiter's arms. In the garden, murmured. The crowd surged gasps and murmurs rippling through the room. Poirot, with Hastings at his heels, pushed through to the garden, where a man lay sprawled beneath a rose arbor, a dagger in his chest. His face was unfamiliar, but his cufflinks bore the same rook symbol from the cipher. Another pawn, Poirot muttered, kneeling to examine the body. And a message. He extracted a folded note from the man's hand, its words chillingly familiar. The rook moves to Paris. The game continues. Hastings glanced at Rostov, who stood at the garden's edge, his face unreadable. "Is he one of them?" he whispered. Poirot's lips tightened. "Perhaps, or perhaps he is another piece on the board. But this murder, it is a taunt, a challenge to Poirot, and I accept." As the Paris police arrived, Poirot slipped the note into his pocket, his mind already racing ahead. The Big Four had struck again, but in doing so, they had left a trail. The gala ended in chaos, but Poirot and Hastings slipped away, their invitations to Paris's underworld secured. The next move was theirs, and in the shadow of the rook, Hercule Poirot vowed to unmask the players in this deadly game. Chapter 2. The Paris Gambit. The train from London to Paris sliced through the dawn, its rhythmic clatter a counterpoint to Hercule Poirot's racing thoughts. The cryptic message from the murdered diplomat, decoded in a fog-draped London study, had pointed to this citier gala at the opulent Hôtel des Crillons, where whispers of a global conspiracy would take shape. Beside him, Captain Hastings fidgeted, his eyes darting to the passing countryside. "Poirot," he said, voice low, "this big for business feels like chasing ghosts. Are you certain this gala is the key?" Poirot adjusted his moustache, his grey eyes gleaming. "Mon ami, ghosts leave footprints. Tonight we hunt for one financier, the second of the four, whose shadow falls across the markets of Europe." Paris glittered under a twilight sky as their taxi wove through the bustling Champs-Élysées. The Hôtel des Crillons loomed ahead, its marble facade aglow with chandeliers' reflections. The gala, hosted by the enigmatic Comte de Rochefort, was a magnet for Europe's elite diplomats, industrialists, and aristocrats, all potential pawns or players in the Big Four's game. Poirot, impeccably dressed in a tailored tuxedo, adjusted his cufflinks. Hastings, observe everyone. The financier will be charismatic, untouchable, yet betrayed by a single florigance. Hastings nodded, clutching the forged invitation Poirot had secured through discreet channels. Inside, the ballroom was a kaleidoscope of wealth. Crystal flutes clinked, laughter mingled with a string quartet's melody, and masked dancers swirled in a masquerade that hid more than faces. Poirot's eyes scanned the crowd, settling on a tall man with silver hair and a magnetic smile. Victor Larousse, a financier whose name surfaced in the diplomat's coded message. Larousse held court near a gilded fountain, his gestures commanding attention from a circle of admirers. "That's our man," Poirot murmured, guiding Hastings through the throng. Larousse's charm was a weapon, disarming diplomats with witty anecdotes, while his eyes flicked to a shadowed alcove, where, a nervous-looking man in spectacles waited. Poirot, feigning interest in a champagne tray, edged closer. Hastings. The man in the alcove note. His posture. He is no guest. He is a courier. Hastings frowned. How can you tell? Poirot's lips twitched. The little grey cells. Mon ami. His shoes are scuffed. His suit ill-fitting yet. He carries a sealed envelope. Watch. The exchange was subtle. Larousse brushed past the courier, a hand slipping into his pocket. The envelope vanished. Poirot's heart quickened. We must follow that envelope. They trailed Larousse through the ballroom, dodging dancers and waiters, until he slipped into a side corridor. The Hotel de Crillon's labyrinthine halls, lined with tapestries and gold-framed mirrors, concealed private salons for discreet dealings. Poirot and Hastings shadowed Larousse to a locked door guarded by a burly man in a black suit. A challenge, Poirot whispered, but every lock has a key. Hastings, ever practical, suggested a distraction. Buy could cause a scene spill. A drink, perhaps. Poirot shook his head. Nan, we need finesse. He approached the guard, adopting the air of a flustered guest. Monsieur, I am lost. The Comte de Rochefort insists I join him for a private toast. Where is the salon door? The guard, momentarily disarmed by Poirot's accent and earnestness, pointed down the hall. As he turned, Poirot's nimble fingers lifted a keycard from his pocket. Merci, Poirot said, slipping away. With Hastings, the keycard unlocked a hidden staircase, descending to a basement vault, its steel door engraved with arcane symbols. Inside, Larousse stood over a table strewn with documents, speaking in hushed tones to a woman in a crimson gown. Her voice, sharp and accented, cut through the air. The markets will crash by dawn if we execute the trades now. Larousse smirked. And we'll profit from the chaos. The Big Four's plan is flawless. Poirot, concealed behind a crate, signaled Hastings to stay silent. The little grey cells worked furiously, piecing together the plot, a coordinated sell-off of European bonds, timed to destabilize currencies and sow panic. The woman in crimson handed Larousse a ledger, its pages dense with figures. This details every transaction, she said. Once the funds are transferred, our associates in Shanghai will escalate the next phase. Poirot's eyes narrowed. Shanghai, the next thread in the web. But first, he needed that ledger. The vault's air grew thick with tension as Larousse tucked the ledger into his coat and moved toward the door. Poirot whispered, Hastings, we must act now. Improvising, Poirot stepped into the light, affecting a drunken stumble. Pardonnez-moi, he slurred, colliding with Larousse. In the chaos, his hand darted into the financier's coat, retrieving the ledger. Larousse's eyes flashed with suspicion, but before he could react, an alarm blared. Someone had triggered the vault's security. The woman in crimson vanished through a side exit, and Larousse bolted, leaving Poirot clutching. The prize. The vault's lights flickered as guards stormed in. Poirot and Hastings ducked behind crates, the ledger tucked safely in Poirot's coat. We must reach the ballroom, Poirot hissed. They navigated a maze of storage rooms, emerging into the garless chaos as guests screamed and security swarmed. Larousse, now at the center of the room, played the victim, claiming a theft. Poirot, blending into the crowd, whispered to Hastings, "He suspects us, but he cannot prove it. We have the ledger, our key to Shanghai." Back at their hotel, Poirot pored over the ledger under lamplight. Its pages revealed a network of shell companies, coded accounts, and cryptic references to the Dragon's Lair, a clear nod to Shanghai's underworld. "The Big Four play a dangerous game," Poirot said, his voice grave. "They seek to topple economies, arm rebellions, and control information. This financier is but one head of the Hydra." Hastings, pacing, asked, "By who are the others, and why Shanghai?" Poirot closed the ledger. "The answers lie across the sea. We sail at dawn." The next morning, as their steamer cut through the Channel's waves, Poirot stood at the rail, the ledger safe in his cabin. Paris faded behind them, its secrets now a map to the next battle. Larousse had slipped away, but the ledger was a blow to the Big Four's plans. Yet Poirot's mind churned with unease. The mysterious figure who watched them leave London, was it Larousse's ally, or another of the four? The game was far from over, and Shanghai's shadows awaited. The journey to Shanghai would be long, but Poirot's resolve was ironclad. Big Four's web-spanned continents, but Hercule Poirot, with his little grey cells, would unravel it one thread at a time. Chapter 3. The Dragon's Lair. The air in Shanghai hung thick with the scent of incense, coal, smoke, and the briny temps of the Huangpu River. Hercule Poirot adjusted the collar of his borrowed merchant's robe, its coarse silk chafing against his neck as he stepped off the steamer into the chaotic embrace of the city's docks. Beside him, Captain Hastings, similarly disguised in a threadbare tunic, clutched a leather satchel containing their forged papers. The sun dipped low, painting the skyline in hues of amber and crimson, but the twilight offered no reprieve from the clamor of rickshaws, hawkers, and the distant clanging of shipyard cranes. Shanghai was a city alive, pulsing with secrets, and somewhere in its labyrinthine depths lurked the third member of the Big Four warlord, whose shadow stretched across the underworld, arming chaos with cold precision. Poirot's grey eyes scanned the crowd, sharp as a hawk's. "Mon ami," he murmured to Hastings, his voice barely audible over the din. "This city is a chessboard, and we are pawns stepping into the Dragon's Lair. We must move with care, for the warlord sees all, knows all, and trusts none." Hastings nodded, his jaw tight. That coated message from Paris had mentioned a red orchid, a name, a place, or something else entirely. "A symbol," Poirot replied, his moustache twitching as he considered. "In the East, the orchid is beauty laced with danger. It is no coincidence. Our quarry hides behind such elegance, but we shall find him." Their journey from the docks led them through the French concession, where gaslit boulevards gave way to narrower streets, their cobblestones slick with evening dew. Lanterns swayed above, casting flickering shadows that seemed to whisper warnings. The message decoded in Paris had been sparse but precise. The warlord, known only as Li Wei in whispers, controlled a network of illegal arms deals fueling unrest across Asia. His next move, a massive shipment to arm a coup in a neighboring nation, was set to unfold in Shanghai's underworld. The Red Orchid was the clear, cryptic reference to a meeting place, a contact, or perhaps the man himself. Their first stop was a tea-house tucked in an alley off the Bont. Its facade unassuming, but its reputation notorious among those who traded by in secret. Inside, the air was heavy with jasmine and the low hum of conversation. Poirot and Hastings, posing as spice merchants from Canton, secured a corner table. A serving girl, her eyes sharp with curiosity, poured steaming oolong into chipped porcelain cups. Red Orchid, Poirot said softly, slipping a silver coin across the table as if it were an afterthought. A name that carries weight in certain circles, none. The girl's fingers paused, her gaze darting to the coin before meeting Poirot's. "You're not from Canton," she said, her voice low but steady. "Accents don't lie. Why do you ask about the orchid?" Poirot's smile was disarming, his tone velvet. "A merchant hears rumors, mademoiselle. We seek only to understand the currents of this city's trade." She leaned closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. "The Red Orchid is no person. It's a place on auction, held in the old silk warehouse by the river. Tomorrow night. But strangers don't walk in uninvited. You'll need a token. And where might one acquire such a token?" Poirot pressed, his eyes gleaming. The girl hesitated, then slipped a folded slip of paper from her sleeve. "Find old Chen at the night market. Tell him May sent you. But be carefully Wei's men. Watch everything." As she vanished into the tea-house's haze, Hastings frowned. "Can we trust her, Poirot? This feels like a trap." "Everything in Shanghai is a trap, Hastings," Poirot replied, unfolding the paper to reveal a crude map. "But even traps reveal truths. Come, we have a market to visit." The night market sprawled across a warren of stalls, its air thick with the aroma of sizzling dumplings and the sharp tang of rice wine. Lanterns bobbed like fireflies, illuminating merchants hawking jade trinkets, smuggled tobacco, and caged songbirds. Poirot moved with purpose, his diminutive frame weaving through the crowd with the grace of a dancer. Hastings, less at ease, kept a hand near the revolver hidden beneath his tunic. Old Chen was easy to spot, a wiry man with a face like weathered parchment, presiding over a stall cluttered with brass compasses and tarnished amulets. His eyes narrowed as Poirot approached. The detective's merchant guise impeccable. "May sends her regards," Poirot said, his tone casual but his gaze piercing. She spoke of a token for a certain exclusive gathering. Ken's fingers drummed on the counter, his voice a gravelly rasp. "May talks too much. Tokens aren't cheap, and they don't come without a name." Jean-Loup Poirot replied smoothly, using the alias on their forged papers. My associate and I seek opportunities beyond the usual trade. Chen studied them, then slid a small jade disc across the counter, etched with an orchid in crimson. Lacquer, Warehouse 17. Midnight tomorrow. Don't be late, and don't be foolish. As they left, Hastings muttered, "That was too easy." He didn't even haggle. "Ease is an illusion." "Mon ami," Poirot said, pocketing the disc. "Chen is a gatekeeper, nothing more. The real test awaits at the Red Orchid." The next night, Warehouse 17 loomed like a forgotten relic on the river's edge, its rusted iron walls cloaked in mist. The jade disc granted them entry past a pair of guards with scarred faces and eyes like flint. Inside, the cavernous space was transformed into a clandestine bazaar. Lanterns hung from rafters, casting a dim glow over tables laden with crates of rifles, grenades, and gleaming katanas. Men in tailored suits mingled with those in rough tunics, their voices a low murmur of French, Mandarin, and Russian. The bear crackled with tension, every glance a potential challenge. Poirot's eyes darted across the crowd, cataloguing faces, gestures, and the subtle bulges of concealed weapons. "Observe, Hastings," he whispered. "This is no mere auction. It is a stage, and Li Wei is the unseen director." They drifted toward a central platform where a wiry auctioneer, his voice sharp as a blade, barked bids for a crate of Mauser pistols. Poirot's attention, however, was drawn to a man in the shadows, a tall figure in a black silk robe, his face half hidden by a lacquered mask. The man's presence commanded silence, his every movement watched by the room's undercurrents. "That's him," Poirot murmured. "Li Wei. The mask is theatrical, but the power is real." Before Hastings could respond, a commotion erupted at the warehouse's rear. A young man, barely out of his teens, stumbled onto the floor, his hands bound. Blood trickled from a gash on his forehead. "Traitor," the auctioneer spat, gesturing to the guards. He tried to steal from the orchid. The masked figure raised a hand, and the room fell silent. "Bring him to me," he said, his voice low but resonant, carrying the weight of absolute authority. Poirot's mind raced. This was no coincidence. The boy's capture was a performance, a message to the room. He leaned toward Hastings. "We must act, mon ami. This boy knows something, and Li Wei intends to silence him." As the guards dragged the boy forward, Poirot slipped through the crowd, his movements fluid, unremarkable. He reached the platform just as the masked figure drew a dagger, its blade glinting in the lantern light. With a flick of his wrist, Poirot tossed a small vial from his pocket, a concoction of his own design, releasing a cloud of choking smoke. Chaos erupted, bidders scrambled, guards shouted, and Poirot seized the boy, pulling him into the shadows. "Who are you?" the boy gasped, his eyes wide with fear. "A friend," Poirot said, cutting the boy's bonds with a concealed blade. "What do you know of Li Wei's plans?" The boy's voice trembled. "He's arming a coup in Siam. The weapons leave tomorrow on the Jade Star, but the fourth one he's untouchable. Leeway fears him. Before Poirot could press further, footsteps echoed behind them. Hastings appeared, revolver drawn. "We've got company." A chase ensued through the warehouse's maze of crates and narrow passages. Bullets ricocheted by off iron walls as Leeway's men closed in. Poirot, the boy, and Hastings burst into an alley. The city's neon glow, a stark contrast to the warehouse's gloom. They ducked into a noodle shop, its owner too weary to question their disheveled state. Safe for the moment, the boy introducing himself as Liang revealed more. Li Wei's not just a warlord, he's a puppet. The fourth member pulls the strings, but no one knows who he is. There's a coda ledger on the Jade Star. It names names, places, everything. Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Then we must board that ship, mon ami. The ledger is the key to the Big Four." The Jade Star was a hulking freighter moored at a private dock, its deck swarming with armed men. Disguised as dock workers, Poirot and Hastings infiltrated the ship at dawn, Liang guiding them to the captain's cabin where the ledger was kept. The air was thick with a stench of oil and salt, the creak of the ship a constant reminder of their precarious position. Inside the cabin, Poirot's nimble fingers worked the lock on a steel safe. The ledger, bound in red leather, was a treasure trove of coded transactions, names of buyers, routes, and a chilling reference to number 4, directing operations from afar. As Poirot pocketed the ledger, alarms blared. Li Wei's men had spotted them. The escape was a blur of gunfire and narrow corridors. Liang, nimble and quick, led them to a lifeboat, but not before a final confrontation on the deck. Li Wei, unmasked, now, his face a map of scars, stood flanked by his men. "You're a fool, little detective," he sneered. "The fourth will crush you." Poirot's voice was calm, cutting. "Perhaps, monsieur, but today it is you who falls." With a signal to Hastings, a flare from their stolen supplies lit the sky, signaling the local police, tipped off by Poirot's earlier machinations. Chaos erupted as officers swarmed the dock. Li Wei fought like a cornered beast, but he was overpowered, his empire crumbling in the dawn's light dot. As the trio slipped away, Poirot studied the ledger under a flickering street lamp. "Cairo," he said, his voice grim. "The trail leads to the sands, Hastings. But Li Wei's words linger. Number 4 is untouchable. For now." They boarded a steamer that night, the city's lights fading behind them. Poirot's mind churned. The ledger's secrets, a puzzle only he could solve. The dragon's lair was breached, but the shadow of the Big Four loomed larger than ever. Chapter 4. Sands of Deception. The sun blazed over Cairo, a molten disk in a sky of relentless blue, casting sharp shadows across the labyrinthine streets. Hercule Poirot adjusted his straw hat, the brim shielding his keen eyes as he stepped from the rattling taxi onto the dusty outskirts of the city. Beside him, Captain Hastings mopped his brow with a handkerchief, his tweed suit woefully out of place in the Egyptian heat. Their destination, an archaeological dig at the edge of the desert, rumored to be a front for something far more sinister than unearthing Pharaoh's treasures. Mon ami, Poirot said, his voice crisp despite the swelter. This dig, it is no mere excavation of the past. The Big Four, they play a game most dangerous, hiding their machinations beneath the sands. We must be, as always, vigilant. Hastings nodded, squinting at the sprawl of tents and scaffolding ahead. A bit rum, isn't it? Smuggling intelligence through a dig. Sounds like something out of a penny dreadful. None, Hastings, Poirot corrected, tapping his cane lightly on the ground. It is precisely because it seems fantastical that it is plausible. The Big Four do not operate in the obvious. They weave their webs in shadows, and we must untangle them with care. The dig site buzzed with activity. Workers in linen tunics hauled baskets of earth, while European scholars in pith helmets barked orders or scribbled furiously in notebooks. The air carried the scent of sun-baked stone and the faint tang of something chemical, perhaps explosives. Poirot mused, his moustache twitching. Their cover was simple. Poirot posed as Monsieur Henry Dubois, a Belgian antiquarian with a penchant for obscure hieroglyphs, while Hastings played his bumbling assistant, Arthur Wells. Their forged credentials had secured an invitation from Dr. Evelyn Warwick, the expedition's lead archaeologist, a woman of sharp intellect and sharper ambition. Dr. Warwick greeted them at the main tent, her auburn hair pinned tightly beneath a wide-brimmed hat. "Monsieur Dubois, Mr. Wells," she said, her British accent clipped. "A pleasure. Your reputation for deciphering ancient scripts precedes you. We've uncovered a new chamber in the tomb hieroglyphs, unlike any I've seen. Perhaps you can shed light." Poirot bowed slightly, his eyes scanning her face for tells. "Mademoiselle, I am most intrigued. Lead on. Si vous plaît." The tomb's entrance yawned like a dark maw in the cliff face, its stone steps descending into cool shadow. As they followed Warwick, Poirot noted the guards too well armed for mere labourers, their eyes too watchful. Hastings, oblivious, chattered pit about the pyramids, until Poirot silenced him with a glance. Inside, the air was damp, heavy with the weight of centuries. Lanterns cast flickering light on walls etched with gods and kings. But Poirot's attention fixed on a newly uncovered panel, its symbols jagged and unfamiliar. "Extraordinary. None," Poirot said, tracing a finger over the carvings. "These are not Egyptian. They resemble ciphers modern, perhaps disguised as ancient." Warwick's eyes narrowed. "A bold claim, Monsieur Dubois. Our team believes they're from a lost dynasty." "Perhaps," Poirot replied, his tone light but his mind racing. The symbols matched patterns from the ledger in Paressa code. Be used by the Big Four. This was no archaeological find. It was a message drop, a hub for smuggling secrets across borders. That night, under a sky ablaze with stars, Poirot and Hastings dined with the expedition team in a canvas pavilion. The conversation danced from artifacts to politics, but Poirot steered it subtly, probing for cracks. Dr. Warwick was guarded, her answers precise, but her assistant, A wiry Frenchman named Julien Lefebvre grew animated over wine, hinting at special shipments leaving the site under cover of darkness. Shipments? Poirot inquired, swirling his glass. Pottery, perhaps, or something more delicate. Lefebvre froze, then laughed too loudly. Just artifacts, monsieur. Nothing to trouble a scholar like you. But Poirot's little grey cells hummed. After dinner, he slipped away, leaving Hastings to distract the team with tales of London. In the shadows of the supply tents, Poirot found crates marked for export too heavy for mere relics. Prying one open, he uncovered not pottery but sealed tubes, each containing microfilm, intelligence reports, military schematics, diplomatic cables, all bound for unknown hands. A twig snapped behind him. Poirot spun, cane raised, to find Lefebvre, his face pale in the moonlight. "You shouldn't be here, Monsieur Dubois," he hissed, a knife glinting in his hand. "Nor should you, Monsieur Lefebvre," Poirot retorted, stepping back. "But then, traitors rarely choose the right path." Lefebvre lunged, but Poirot was quicker, sidestepping and striking the man's wrist with his cane. The knife clattered to the ground, and a shout from Hastings bless. His timing brought workers running. Lefebvre bolted into the desert, vanishing into the dunes. The next day, Poirot presented his findings to Warwick, omitting the microfilm's specifics. "Mademoiselle, your assistant is involved in matters most unsavory. I suggest you inspect your shipments closely." Warwick's composure faltered, but she agreed to an audit. Poirot, however, had no intention of waiting. That night, he and Hastings followed a lead from Lefebvre's dropped notebook reference to a tomb meeting at midnight. Disguised in Bedouin robes, they crept to a hidden chamber deep within the dig site, its entrance concealed behind a false wall. Inside, a dozen figures gathered around a stone table, their faces masked. Microfilm tubes changed hands, and whispered plans filled the air. Sabotage, espionage, destabilization. Poirot's heart sank as he recognized one voice. Warwick's. She was no dupe, but a player in the Big Four's game. Before Poirot could signal retreat, the chamber's ceiling groaned, dust rained down, and a deafening crack split the air. A trap, Hastings gasped as stones began to fall. The conspirators fled, sealing the exit behind them. Poirot, with infuriating calm, scanned the chamber, spotting a narrow crevice in the wall. Vite Hastings. "The little grey cells, they do not fail me." They squeezed through, emerging into a forgotten tunnel as the chamber collapsed. Gasping in the cool night air, Poirot clutched a stolen microfilm tube, its contents a map marked with a single word: Vienna. Warwick had escaped, but her betrayal was exposed. As dawn broke, Poirot and Hastings boarded a steamer for Europe, the desert wind at their backs. "The Big Four, they are clever," Poirot murmured, studying the map. "But Hercule Poirot, he is cleverer still." In Vienna, the game would continue. Chapter 5. The Vienna Masquerade. The train to Vienna sliced through the Alps, its rhythmic clatter a counterpoint to the storm brewing in Hercule Poirot's mind. The little Belgian detective sat in his first-class compartment, his grey eyes scanning the dossier he'd pieced together from Cairo. Captain Hastings, ever the loyal companion, lounged across from him, his brow furrowed as he tried to make sense of their latest clue. A scrap of vellum with the words, "Masquerade at midnight. The eagle's shadow falls." "It's rather theatrical, don't you think, Poirot?" Hastings ventured, adjusting his tie. "All this cloak-and-dagger nonsense. Why can't these villains just send a telegram and be done with it?" Poirot's moustache twitched, a faint smile betraying his amusement. "Mon ami, the theatricality is their shield. The Big Four do not merely act, they perform this masquerade. Invient is no mere ball. It is a stage, and we must play our parts to unmask the first of their number, this so-called diplomat." The train pulled into Vienna's Hauptbahnhof under a sky bruised with twilight. The city glittered with old-world charm, its spires and cobblestones whispering of empires past. Yet beneath the elegance, Poirot sensed a current of danger, as if the very air held its breath. The clue pointed to a grand ball at the Hofburg Palace, a glittering affair hosted by a reclusive aristocrat known only as Baron von Sturm. Rumors swirled that the event was a cover for something far darker, a transaction involving state secrets stolen from half a dozen nations at their hotel. Poirot transformed himself with the precision of a stage actor. He donned a tailored black suit, a silver cravat, and a half-mask of obsidian silk that accentuated his piercing eyes. Hastings, less comfortable in his own mask of emerald green, grumbled about feeling like a dashed peacock. "Patience, Hastings," Poirot said, adjusting his friend's lapel. "Tonight we are not ourselves. We are players in a game of shadows. Observe, listen, and above all, do not trust the masks." The Hofburg's ballroom was a vision of opulence. Crystal chandeliers cast prisms across gilded walls, and the air, thrummed with Strauss waltzes. Masked guests swirled in a kaleidoscope of silks and velvets, their identities cloaked in anonymity. Poirot moved through the crowd like a spectre, his small stature belying the sharpness of his gaze. Hastings trailed behind, clutching a glass of champagne and scanning for anyone matching the description of the diplomat, a tall man with a scar above his left brow, rumored to favor a crimson mask near the center of the room. A woman in a sapphire gown caught Poirot's eye. Her movements were too deliberate, her laughter too calculated. She glided toward a man in a crimson mask, his posture regal yet tense. Poirot's instincts flared. The diplomat. He nudged Hastings, who nearly spilled his drink. "Steady, mon ami," Poirot whispered. "Follow me, but keep your distance. We must not spook our quarry." The crimson-masked man led the woman through a set of double doors to a private salon, its walls draped in crimson velvet. Poirot slipped in behind them, blending into the shadows of a marble column. The salon was dimly lit, its air thick with cigar smoke and the murmur of voices. The diplomat stood at a table, exchanging a slim envelope with the woman. Their conversation was low, urgent. "You have the codes?" the woman asked, her voice sharp as cut glass. "They're here," the diplomat replied, tapping the envelope. "Enough to cripple London's defenses. But the price has doubled. The Big Four demand loyalty, and your government's hesitation is troubling." Poirot's heart quickened. He signaled Hastings to stay back, then edged closer, his footsteps silent on the plush carpet. The woman hesitated, then slid a velvet pouch across the table. The clink of coins, or perhaps something more sinister, echoed in the stillness. Before Poirot could act, a third figure emerged from the shadows, a man in a silver mask, his movements swift and predatory. "Enough," he hissed. "The exchange is compromised." The diplomat spun, his hand darting to his waist. A gunshot rang out, sharp and deafening, in the enclosed space. The woman screamed, and the envelope fell to the floor as the diplomat staggered, clutching his shoulder. Chaos erupted. Guests outside the salon shrieked, and footsteps pounded toward the room. Poirot acted on instinct. He darted forward, snatching the envelope before it could be reclaimed. The silver-masked man lunged, but Poirot was already moving, weaving through the crowd, now pouring into the salon. Hastings, bless his loyal heart, barreled into the silver-masked man, sending him sprawling. "Run, Poirot!" Hastings shouted, grappling with the assailant. Poirot needed no urging. He sprinted through the ballroom, the envelope clutched tightly in his gloved hand. The waltz faltered, and masked faces turned, their eyes gleaming with curiosity or suspicion. Behind him, shouts and the clatter of pursuit grew louder. The diplomat, blood-staining his crimson mask, was on his feet, barking orders to unseen allies. Poirot's mind raced as he navigated the palace's labyrinthine corridors. He needed a way out, a place to hide and decipher the envelope's contents. A sign caught his eye. Opera House. The palace's opera house, adjacent to the ballroom, was his best chance. He slipped through a side door, emerging into a darkened auditorium where velvet seats stretched into the gloom. The envelope burned in his hand. He tore it open, revealing a single sheet of paper covered in cryptic symbols, a cipher, intricate and unfamiliar. Poirot's lips curved into a grim smile. Ciphers were his domain, the playground of his little grey cells. But there was no time to linger. Footsteps echoed behind him, and the beam of a flashlight sliced through the darkness. He ducked behind a row of seats, his heart pounding. The diplomat's voice rang out, cold and commanding. "Find him. He cannot leave with those codes." Poirot's mind worked furiously. The opera house was a maze of catwalks and trapdoors, a perfect stage for evasion. He crept toward a spiral staircase leading to the upper tiers, his movements silent despite the polished shoes. Above, the catwalks swayed gently, draped in shadows. He climbed, the envelope tucked inside his jacket. From his vantage point, he saw the diplomat and two henchmen fanning out below, their flashlights sweeping the seats. The silver-masked man joined them, his voice low and venomous. "He's here. I can feel it." Poirot's eyes narrowed. The silver-masked man was no mere lackey. His authority suggested a deeper connection to the Big Four. perhaps even the first member himself, playing a double game. Poirot filed the thought away, focusing on escape. A trapdoor in the catwalk led to a backstage passage, and he slipped through, emerging into a costume room filled with racks of glittering gowns and feathered masks. He paused, catching his breath. The cipher needed solving, but safety came first. He rifled through the costumes, selecting a heavy cloak and a new mascot, Golden Lion, bold and distracting. Disguised, he stepped into a service corridor, only to freeze as a figure blocked his path. The woman in the sapphire gown, her mask was gone, revealing a face both beautiful and cold. "Pure, clever, Monsieur Poirot," she said, her accent faintly Russian. "But you're meddling in affairs beyond your grasp." Poirot's moustache twitched. "Mademoiselle Hercule Poirot does not meddle. He uncovers. And you, I think, are no mere courier." She smiled, a predator's grin. "Give me the envelope, and you might live." Poirot's hand hovered near his pocket, where a small revolver lay hidden, a precaution he rarely used. "And if I refuse?" Her hand flashed, a dagger glinting in the dim light. But Poirot was ready. He sidestepped, using the cloak to entangle her arm, and in a swift motion pinned her against the wall. "Mademoiselle, violence is so unbecoming. Tell me, who is the diplomat, and what is the true purpose of these codes?" Her eyes burned with defiance, but before she could answer, a shout echoed from the corridor. The diplomat and his men were closing in. Poirot released her, knowing he had seconds to act. He bolted down the passage, emerging into the snowy streets. B of Vienna. The night was alive with a clatter of carriages and the distant strains of music. Poirot blended into a crowd of late-night revelers, his lion mask drawing no attention in the city's festive chaos. He found a quiet cafe, its windows fogged with warmth, and slipped inside. There, under the flicker of a gas lamp, he studied the cipher. The symbols were a blend of ancient Greek and alchemical notation, a puzzle designed to confound. But Poirot's mind was a machine of precision. Line by line, he unraveled the code, revealing a list of names, ministers, generals, and industrialists marked for blackmail or assassination. At the bottom, a single word stood out. Rio Poirot leaned back, his mind racing. The Big Four's reach was vast, their ambitions staggering. The diplomat had escaped, but the codes were secure, and the trail now led to Rio de Janeiro. He folded the paper, tucking it into a hidden pocket. Hastings, he hoped, had evaded capture. They would reunite in the morning, but for now, Poirot was alone with his thoughts as he sipped a coffee. A shadow passed the window, a figure in a crimson mask, watching from the street. Poirot's grip tightened on his cup. The game was far from over. The next morning, Poirot found Hastings at their hotel, nursing a bruised jaw, but otherwise unharmed. "Blasted fellow got the better of me," Hastings muttered. "But I gave as good as I got." Poirot clapped his friend's shoulder. "You did well, mon ami. The codes are safe, and we have our next destination, Rio. The Big Four think they have outwitted us, but they underestimate Hercule Poirot." As they boarded a steamer bound for South America, Poirot's mind churned with questions. Who was the woman in the sapphire gown? Was the silver-masked man the true first member, or another pawn? And what awaited them in the vibrant chaos of Rio's carnival? The answers, he knew, would come only through patience, cunning, and the relentless pursuit of truth. The ship's horn sounded, and Vienna faded into the distance. Poirot stood at the railing, his eyes fixed on the horizon. The masquerade was over, but the war had just begun. Chapter 6. Carnival of Shadows. The air in Rio de Janeiro pulsed with life, a feverish rhythm that seemed to shake the cobblestones beneath Hercule Poirot's polished shoes. The city was ablaze with the carnival, its streets a kaleidoscope of sequined costumes, samba drums, and laughter that drowned out the whispers of conspiracy. Poirot adjusted his straw hat, its brim shielding his sharp grey eyes from the tropical sun, and scanned the crowd. Somewhere in this vibrant chaos, the financier from Paris, the second member of the Big Four, was weaving a web of deceit. The ledger from Paris, with its cryptic codes, had led him here, to a city where shadows danced as freely as the revelers. Captain Arthur Hastings, ever the loyal companion, mopped his brow beside Poirot. "Good heavens, Poirot, how do you propose we find anyone in this madness? It's like searching for a needle in a haystack made of feathers and glitter." Poirot's moustache twitched with a hint of a smile. "Mon ami, the needle does not hide by being stilt moves with the haystack. We must follow the rhythm, not fight it. The financier, he is here, and he will reveal himself through his ambition." Their journey had begun at the docks, where the steamer from Cairo deposited them amid a throng of merchants and tourists. The ledger, a leather-bound tome of coded transactions, had hinted at a money-laundering scheme woven into the fabric of Rio's elite. Names like Samba do Oro and Carnival Trust appeared repeatedly, disguised as cultural societies, but reeking of financial subterfuge. Poirot's little grey cells had hummed as he deciphered the pattern. The financier was using the carnival as a cover, funneling illicit funds through the city's most prominent samba schools. The duo checked into a modest hotel in Copacabana, its balcony overlooking the beach, where waves crashed in time with distant drums. Poirot, dressed in a lightweight linen suit, pored over the ledger under the flicker of a gas lamp. "See here, Hastings," he said, tapping a page. "These numbers, they are not mere accounts. They are a map, a choreography of money moving through the carnival. The Samba do Oro is no dance troupe. It is a front." Hastings frowned, sipping a caipirinha. "A samba school laundering money. That's a bit theatrical, even for the Big Four." "Precisement," Poirot replied, his eyes gleaming. "The theatricality is the point. In the chaos of carnival, who notices a few extra millions changing hands? We must attend the parade tonight. The financier will be there, hiding in plain sight." The Copacabana Palace, Rio's grandest hotel, was hosting a pre-carnival gala, a glittering affair attended by the city's elite politicians, tycoons, and samba school patrons. Poirot, ever the chameleon, secured invitations through a discreet contact at the British consulate, presenting himself as a Belgian art collector, with a penchant for Brazilian culture. Hastings, less convincingly, posed as his assistant, his military bearing at odds with the festive mood inside the ballroom. Chandeliers cast golden light over swirling couples and champagne flutes. Poirot's gaze darted across the room, cataloguing faces. A woman in a peacock-feathered mask laughed too loudly. A man in a tailored tuxedo lingered too long near the terrace doors. Then he saw her Isabella Ferreira, the glamorous patroness of Sambadu Oro. The ledger had mentioned her name in connection with offshore accounts. Her emerald gown shimmered as she moved through the crowd, her smile a perfect mask, Madame Fajita. Poirot murmured to Hastings, "She is the key. Watch how she commands the room, yet her eyes they search for someone." Hastings nodded, his hand instinctively brushing his coat where a revolver was concealed. "You think she's the financier? No, mon ami. She is his instrument. The financier is too clever to appear himself, but he will be close, pulling her strings." Poirot approached Isabella, bowing with old-world charm. "Madame, your patronage of the Sambadu Oro is the talk of Rio. Might a humble collector learn the secret of your school's brilliance?" Isabella's eyes flickered with amusement, but something colder lurked beneath. "You flatter me, Monsieur Dubois." Poirot lied smoothly. "Jérôme Dubois." "The secret, Monsieur Dubois, is passion," she said, her voice like silk and resources. "The right friends make all the difference." "Friends with deep pockets, no doubt," Poirot replied, his tone light but probing. "I hear that Carnival Trust provides generous support." Her smile faltered for a fraction of a second. "You are well informed, monsieur. Perhaps you should join us at the parade tomorrow. Our float is unforgettable." As she glided away, Poirot leaned toward Hastings. "She knows more than she says. The float, she emphasized it. We must inspect it before the parade." The Besambadrome, Rio's heart of carnival, was a riot of preparation the next morning. Floats towered like moving cathedrals, adorned with gilded statues and cascading flowers. The Sambadu Arrow's float was a masterpiece, a golden jaguar atop a pyramid of mirrored panels, its eyes glinting with what Poirot suspected were not mere gemstones. Workers swarmed around it, but one wiry figure in a straw hat lingered near the base, his movements too precise for a mere laborer. "That man," Poirot whispered to Hastings, "he is no worker. Observe the way he checks the floats. Undercarriage. He is searching for something, or ensuring it remains hidden." Under the guise of admiring the craftsmanship, Poirot approached the float, his cane tapping rhythmically. The wiry man glanced up, his eyes narrowing. Poirot smiled blandly. "Magnifique, such artistry. May I ask, what are these panels made of?" The man muttered something about special glass and slipped away into the crowd. Poirot knelt, pretending to adjust his shoe, and peered beneath the float. A concealed compartment, barely visible, was tucked into the framework. He tapped it lightly with his cane, hearing a hollow echo. "Hastings," he said softly, "we return tonight. That compartment holds the key to the financier's scheme." That evening, the Sambadrome exploded into life. Drums thundered. Dancers swayed in costumes that defied gravity, and the crowd roared as floats rolled past. Poirot and Hastings, now dressed as revelers in simple masks, slipped through the chaos toward the Samba du Aro's staging area. The float was moments from joining the parade, its golden jaguar gleaming under floodlights. Using the crowd as cover, Poirot pried open the compartment with a pocket knife. Inside was a steel case, locked with a combination. His fingers danced over the dials, recalling the numerical patterns from the Paris ledger. With a soft click, the case opened, revealing a second ledger, this one filled with names, dates, and dollar amounts. Payments to politicians, bribes to customs officials, and transfers to Swiss banks. "Hastings, this is the heart of their operation," Poirot said, slipping the ledger into his satchel. "But we are not alone." A shadow moved behind them. The wiry man from earlier stood with a pistol, his face unmasked, now sharp cheekbones, eyes like a predator's. "You're clever, little man," he sneered in accented English, "but not clever enough." Before Hastings could draw his revolver, a samba dancer, a young woman with a feathered headdress, lunged from the crowd, her movements a blur. She knocked the pistol from the man's hand with a kick, then vanished into the throng. The wiry man cursed and fled, swallowed by the parade. "Who was that?" Hastings gasped, retrieving the pistol. "A friend, perhaps," Poirot said, his eyes scanning the crowd. "Or another player in this game. Come, we must move." The chase led them through the Sambadrome's underbelly, a maze of scaffolding, and costume racks. The wiry man was fast, but Poirot's mind was faster. He anticipated the man's route, cutting him off at a narrow exit. Hastings tackled him, pinning him to the ground. "Who are you working for?" Poirot demanded, his voice steel. The man spat. "You'll never touch him. The financier is in New York, planning something bigger. You're too late." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "New York, you say? Then we shall meet him there, as police." Alerted by the commotion, took the man into custody. Poirot and Hastings slipped away. The ledger, now in their possession, was a bombshell proof of the Big Four's reach across continents. But the wiry man's words echoed in Poirot's mind. A bigger plan in New York. The second member was not finished. At the docks, as they boarded a ship bound for America, Poirot stood at the railing, the ledger tucked safely in his coat. The carnival's lights faded behind them, but its shadows lingered. "Hastings," he said, "the financier thinks he has outrun us, but Hercule Poirot does not chase shadows, he traps them." The ship's horn sounded, signaling their departure. Ria's vibrancy gave way to the open sea, and Poirot's thoughts turned to New York. The Big Four's web was vast, but he was unraveling it, thread by thread. The game was far from over. Chapter 7. The Manhattan Conspiracy. Hercule Poirot stepped off the transatlantic liner onto the bustling docks of New York City. the air thick with the briny temps of the Hudson and the frenetic energy of a metropolis in its prime. It was 1925, and Manhattan shimmered with ambitions, skyscrapers clawing at the clouds, jazz notes spilling from hidden speakeasies, and the pulse of a world remaking itself after the Great War. Yet, beneath this glittering veneer, Poirot sensed a shadow, the second member of the Big Four, a tech magnate whose schemes threatened to choke global communication like a noose around a throat. Captain Hastings, ever the loyal companion, adjusted his hat against the autumn breeze. Good heavens, Poirot, this city's a labyrinth. How do we even begin to find our man in this chaos? Poirot's mustache twitched, his eyes gleaming with that familiar spark of genius. Mon ami, in chaos lies clarity. The second of the Big Four, this so-called magnate, thrives in the invisible currents of information. We shall follow the wires, the cables, the whispers of power. He cannot hide from Poirot. Their first lead came from the ledger recovered in Rio, its cryptic entries pointing to a man named Victor Crane, a titan of industry whose company, Crane Communications, was revolutionizing telegraphy and telephony. Crane's public face was that of a philanthropist, funding libraries and radio stations. But the ledger hinted at darker dealings, coded messages, intercepted diplomatic cables, and a plan to sabotage the transatlantic telegraph lines that bound Europe and America. If successful, Crane could plunge international diplomacy into chaos, leaving nations blind and deaf to each other's moves. Perfect stage for the Big Four's global machinations. Poirot and Hastings checked into the opulent Plaza Hotel, its chandeliers casting golden light over marble floors. From there, sweet Poirot spread out a map of Manhattan, marking Crane's known haunts, his corporate headquarters in the Flatiron District, a private club in Midtown, and a mysterious warehouse near the Brooklyn docks. We must move swiftly. Hastings, Poirot said, tapping the map. Crane is no ordinary criminal. He is a spider, and his web spans continents. Their first stop was a speakeasy tucked behind a tailor's shop in Greenwich Village, where jazz saxophones wailed and flappers twirled under dim lights. The ledger had mentioned a contact here, a woman named Leela Voss, known for passing messages to Crane's operatives. Disguised in a sharp pinstripe suit, Poirot sipped a mocktail insisting on clarity of mind while Hastings, less restrained, nursed a gin. Lila appeared as a vision in emerald silk, her eyes sharp as she scanned the room. Poirot approached, his charm disarming. Mademoiselle Voss, he began, bowing slightly. I am a collector of rare information, and I hear you possess treasures beyond compare. Lila's lips curled into a wary smile. You're bold, Frenchman. What's your game? No game. Only a desire to understand certain transactions. A mutual friend, perhaps, in Rio. Poirot's voice was velvet, but his eyes pinned her like a butterfly. Her smile faltered. You're fishing in dangerous waters. Meet me at the back alley in 10 minutes, alone. The alley was a canyon of shadows, reeking of garbage and coal smoke. Lila arrived, But not alone. 2 burly men flanked her, their knuckles gleaming with brass. "You're no collector," she hissed. "Who sent you?" Poirot, unruffled, adjusted his cufflinks. "The truth, mademoiselle. It always finds me." The thugs lunged, but Poirot was no stranger to danger. With a flick of his cane, he tripped one, sending him crashing into a stack of crates. Hastings, bursting from the shadows, tackled the other, his rugby days proving useful. Leela bolted. But Poirot's keen eye caught a scrap of paper. She dropped a coded note with coordinates pointing to the Brooklyn warehouse. The warehouse was a fortress of corrugated iron, its windows blacked out, guarded by men with hard faces, panned, harder fists. Poirot and Hastings, posing as dock workers, slipped inside under cover of night. The interior was a labyrinth of crates and humming machinery, telegraph wires snaking across the ceiling like veins. At the center stood a massive device, a tangle of copper and steel, pulsing with electric life. Poirot's eyes widened. "Mon Dieu, Hastings, this is no mere telegraph relay. It is a disruptor, capable of severing the transatlantic cables. Signals." A voice cut through the dark. "Very astute, Monsieur Poirot." Victor Crane emerged, his tailored suit immaculate, his smile cold as steel. "You've wandered into my web." Crane was a man of contradictions, boyish charm masking ruthless ambition, his voice smooth yet laced with menace. He gestured to the device. "This beauty will silence the cables, leaving nations scrambling. And when they do, the Big Four will guide the world's new order." Poirot's mind raced, cataloguing details. Crane's confidence, the guards' positions, the faint hum of a secondary power source. "You underestimate the resilience of order, monsieur. And you underestimate me." Crane laughed, signaling his men. A brutal fight erupted. Hastings, grappling with guards, Poirot dodging blows with surprising agility. Amid the chaos, Poirot reached the disruptor, his nimble fingers tracing wires to a critical junction. With a pocket knife, he severed a key circuit, sparks flying as the machine whined to a halt. Crane roared, drawing a pistol, but Poirot was faster, hurling a crate lid to knock the weapon away. The magnate fled, vanishing into the night, but not before dropping a notebook filled with coded plans for Moscow. The warehouse raid drew police attention, and Poirot ensured the disruptor was dismantled, thwarting Crane's immediate scheme. As dawn broke over Manhattan's skyline, Poirot and Hastings stood on a rooftop, the city sprawling below. "He escaped," Poirot, Hastings said, frustration evident. "And we're no closer to the 4th member." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Au contraire, mon ami. Each step reveals the pattern." Crane's notebook speaks of Moscow, a new thread in the tapestry. "We board a flight tonight." The transatlantic plane awaited, its propellers humming with promise. Poirot, clutching the notebook, felt the weight of the chase. The Big Four's endgame loomed, and in the cold skies ahead, Moscow promised answers and danger. Chapter 8. The Kremlin Riddle. The Moscow winter gripped the city like a vice. its icy breath turning the Moskva River into a ribbon of frost. Hercule Poirot, bundled in a heavy overcoat with a fur-lined collar, stepped off the train at Belaruski station, his moustache dusted with snowflakes. Captain Hastings followed, his face ruddy from the cold, his breath puffing in the frigid air. The platform buzzed with travelers, their voices muffled by scarves and the clatter of boots on ice-licked stones. Above them, the city's spires loomed through the snowfall, the Kremlin's red walls a distant promise of secrets. "Poirot," Hastings said, pulling his coat tighter, "I hope you've got a plan. Moscow in January feels like a punishment, not a destination." Poirot's green eyes glinted beneath his Homburg hat. "Mon ami, the cold, it sharpens the mind. And in Moscow we hunt a quarry most elusive, the successor to our warlord from Shanghai. The Big Four, they do not rest, and neither shall we." Their journey to Moscow had been prompted by a cryptic lead from New York, where Poirot had thwarted a plot to sabotage transatlantic cables. The tech magnate's escape had left behind a coded message, its symbols pointing to a clandestine meeting in the Russian capital. The cipher deciphered on the long flight across the Atlantic mentioned a strategist orchestrating unrest in Eastern Europe, a shadowy figure tied to the Kremlin's underbelly. Poirot suspected this was the third member of the Big Four, their chosen heir. Their first stop was a small, smoky cafe near Red Square, its windows fogged against the cold. Poirot, posing as a Belgian journalist named Henry Dupont, had arranged to meet a contact, a former Bolshevik-turned-informant known only as Volkov. The cafe smelled of black tea and rye bread, its patrons a mix of grizzled workers and furtive intellectuals. Poirot sipped his tea, his eyes scanning the room, while Hastings fidgeted, uneasy in the foreign setting. "Relax, Hastings," Poirot murmured. "In Moscow, suspicion is a currency. We must appear as ordinary as the snow." A man slid into their booth, his face half hidden by a woolen cap. His eyes, sharp and grey, darted to Poirot. "You're Dupont?" he asked, his voice low, accented, with the grit of the streets. "Oui," Poirot replied, his tone smooth. "And you, I presume, are Volkov?" The man nodded, sliding a folded newspaper across the table. Tucked inside was a scrap of paper with a single address: Tverskaya Street, No. 17, midnight. "The strategist meets tonight," Volkov whispered. "A basement club, hidden beneath a tailor's shop. They call it the Black Rook. Be careful, Dupont. These people, they see everything." Poirot pocketed the paper, his expression unreadable. "Bye, and this strategist, what is their game?" Volkov leaned closer, his voice barely audible. "Chaos. They stir the pot border skirmishes, assassinations, whispers of rebellion. The Kremlin knows nothing, or pretends not to. The strategist answers to a higher power, one that spans the globe." "The Big Four," Poirot said softly, testing the waters. Volkov's eyes widened, and he stood abruptly. "I've said enough. Good luck, Dupont." He vanished into the crowd, leaving Poirot and Hastings alone with the weight of his words. Tverskaya Street at midnight was a study in contrasts. Grand facades lit by gaslights, shadowed alleys hiding secrets. The tailor's shop at No. 17 was shuttered, its sign faded, but a faint hum of music leaked from below. Poirot, now dressed in a nondescript suit to blend with Moscow's working class, knocked thrice on a side door. A panel slid open, revealing pair of suspicious eyes. "Password," the voice growled. Poirot, recalling a phrase from the New York cipher, replied, "The ruck takes the night." The door creaked open, revealing a narrow staircase descending into darkness. The air grew warmer, thick with cigarette smoke and the temps of vodka. At the bottom, a subterranean club pulsed with life. Men in rough coats, women in sequined dresses, all moving to the rhythm of a balalaika band. Poirot's eyes scanned the room, landing on a curtained alcove where a group of men huddled, their faces tense. "There," Poirot whispered to Hastings. "The meeting, we must listen, but not be seen." They slipped into a corner booth, partially hidden by a tattered velvet curtain. Poirot ordered a glass of Kavos, his ears attuned to the alcove's conversation. The voices were low, but one stood out a woman's, sharp and commanding, with a faint trace of a Baltic accent. "The border must burn by spring," she said. "Poland, Ukraine, Lithuania, they'll tear each other apart, and we'll pick up the pieces, the big for demand results, not excuses." Hastings stiffened, but Poirot's hand on his arm kept him silent. The woman, the strategist, was younger than expected, perhaps 30, with raven hair and eyes like chipped ice. Her companions nodded, their faces a mix of fear and ambition. One, a burly man with a scarred cheek, spoke up. "And the funds?" "The Shanghai shipment was seized. We need more to arm the militias." The woman's lips curled. "The funds will come. Number 4 has secured a new channel through Istanbul. Focus on the plan, disrupt the peace talks. Sow distrust. The Kremlin. Be too busy to notice." Poirot's mind raced. This strategist, likely the successor to the Shanghai warlord, was a key piece in the Big Four's puzzle. Her mention of Istanbul confirmed the cipher's next clue, but capturing her here, in this den of vipers, would be no simple task. As the meeting adjourned, the strategist stood, her movements graceful but predatory. She paused, her gaze sweeping the room, and for a moment it locked on Poirot's booth. Hastings held his breath, but Poirot sipped his Kavos, his face a mask of indifference. She moved on, disappearing through a back door. "We must follow her," Poirot said, rising. "But with care. She is no ordinary foe." The chase led them through Moscow's frozen streets, the snow falling heavier now, obscuring their path. The strategist moved like a wraith, slipping into alleys and doubling back, as if sensing pursuit. Poirot, undeterred, followed her trail to a dilapidated warehouse near the Moskva River, its windows dark, its walls crusted with ice. Inside, the air was stale, the floor littered with crates stamped with Cyrillic warnings. Poirot and Hastings crept forward, guided by the faint glow of a lantern. The strategist stood alone, speaking into a bulky radio, her voice clipped. "The Belgian is here," she said. "Yes, Poirot. He's closer than we thought. We need to accelerate the plan." Poirot froze, his heart pounding. She knew his name, his real name. The Big Four were not just aware of him. They were tracking him. Hastings, sensing the danger, drew his revolver. But Poirot shook his head. "Nan Hastings," he whispered. "We listen. Knowledge is our weapon." The strategist ended her call and turned, her eyes scanning the shadows. Poirot pulled Hastings behind a crate just as her gaze swept past. She muttered something in Russian, then slipped through a side door, leaving the warehouse silent. Poirot approached the radio, its dials still warm. A scrap of paper beside it bore a new cipher, a string of numbers and a single word, Bosphorus. "Istanbul," Poirot said, his voice grim. "The game moves eastward." Before they could leave, the warehouse doors burst open, and a dozen men stormed in, their faces masked, their hands gripping knives and pistols. The strategist had set a trap. Poirot, with a speed belying his age, grabbed Hastings and dove behind a stack of crates as gunfire erupted. "Stay low," Poirot hissed, his mind racing for an escape. The crates offered cover, but the men were closing in, their footsteps heavy on the concrete. Poirot spotted a rusted ladder leading to a catwalk above. There Hastings moved. They scrambled up the ladder, bullets pinging off the metal. The catwalk led to a skylight, its glass cracked but intact. Hastings smashed it with his revolver's butts, and they climbed onto the roof, the cold air biting their faces. Below, the men shouted, their voices echoing in the night. The roof was a maze of chimneys and vents, slick with ice. Poirot, with surprising agility, led the way, navigating by the distant glow of the Kremlin's lights. They reached the edge where a fire escape descended into an alley. As they climbed down, a car roared to life, its headlights pinning them like prey. "Run!" Poirot shouted, and they sprinted through the snow, the car in pursuit. The alley twisted, leading to a crowded market street where vendors hawked furs and hot pies despite the hour. Poirot and Hastings blended into the throng, the car's engine fading as it was forced to stop, panting. They ducked into a church, its golden domes gleaming faintly in the moonlight. Inside, the air was warm, scented with incense. Poirot sank. "Pew," his breath steadying. "We have survived, mon ami." But the strategist, she, is a step ahead. Hastings, still clutching his revolver, shook his head. "She knew you were coming, Poirot." "How?" Poirot's eyes narrowed. "A leak, perhaps, or a traitor in our circle. The Big Four, they are not merely powerful, they are omniscient. But this cipher," he held up the paper, "it is their mistake. Istanbul awaits, and there we shall turn the hunter into the hunted." The next morning, Poirot and Hastings boarded a train for Istanbul, the cipher tucked safely in Poirot's pocket. The Moscow chase had been a close call, but it had yielded a name. Irina Volnova, the strategist, a former intelligence officer. She had vanished from official records, only to resurface as a puppet of the Big Four. Her plan to ignite border conflicts was clear. but her connection to Istanbul suggested a larger scheme. One Poirot was determined to unravel. As the train rattled through the snowy plains, Poirot studied the cipher, his little grey cells working overtime. The numbers formed coordinates, pointing to a specific district in Istanbul's old city. The word Bosphorus hinted at a meeting by the water, perhaps a ship or a safe house. But the strategist's knowledge of Poirot's identity gnawed at him. Someone was feeding the Big Four information, and he had to find out who. Hastings, he said, breaking the silence. In Istanbul, we must be, as the fox cunning, invisible. The Big Four believe they hold the board, but Poirot, he plays a different game. Hastings nodded, his resolve hardening. We'll get her, Poirot, and the rest of them. The train's whistle pierced the dawn, and Poirot leaned back, his eyes fixed on the horizon. The Kremlin's riddle had been solved, but the war was far from over. In Istanbul, the next piece of the puzzle waited, and Hercule Poirot would not rest until the Big Four were brought to light. Chapter 9. The Bosphorus Betrayal. The Bosphorus shimmered under the Istanbul sun, a ribbon of sapphire splitting Europe and Asia, its surface alive with the dance of ferries and fishing boats. Hercule Poirot stood at the railing of a weathered vessel crossing from Emin to Üsküdar. His grey eyes narrowed against the glare. His overcoat, meticulously pressed despite the humid air, fluttered as he scanned the horizon. Captain Hastings, ever his shadow, leaned beside him, clutching a map of the city marked with cryptic annotations from their Cairo findings. The map, stained with desert dust, pointed to Istanbul as the nexus of the next move by the Big Four, plot to sabotage delicate peace talks between rival nations. Somewhere in this ancient city, a double agent within British intelligence, linked to the elusive first member of the Four, was orchestrating chaos. Mon ami Poirot murmured, his voice soft but carrying the weight of certainty. Istanbul is a city of masks. Here, truth hides behind 1,000 veils, and our quarry thrives in such ambiguity. We must be precise, for the Bosphorus betrays as easily as it beguiles. Hastings adjusted his hat, squinting at the minarets piercing the skyline. That dossier from Cairo mentioned a serpent's signal. Sounds like a code for something, maybe a meeting place or a courier. But how do we even start in a city this big? Poirot's mustache twitched, a faint smile betraying his relish. For the challenge, we start, Hastings, with the pulse of the city, the bazaars, the mosques, the whispers of those who see all but say little. The serpent's signal is no mere phrase. It is a thread in the tapestry of the Big Four's design. We shall pull it and see what unravels. Their ferry docked at Üsküdar, and the duo plunged into the city's labyrinthine heart. Istanbul was a sensory assault. The temps of roasted chestnuts mingled with the salt of the sea, while the call to prayer echoed from the domes of Hagia Sophia and the Blue Mosque. Their first lead came from the Cairo dossier, reference to a spice merchant in the Grand Bazaar, known only as Yusuf, who was suspected of passing messages for the double agent. The bazaar, a sprawling hive of commerce, was their starting point, the Grand Bazaar buzzed like a living organism, its vaulted ceilings trapping the cacophony of haggling voices and the clink of copper trays. Narrow alleys brimmed with stalls selling saffron, silks, and silver lanterns, each vendor's cry a note in the city's chaotic symphony. Poirot, disguised as a Belgian antiquarian in a slightly frayed suit, moved with purpose, his cane tapping a rhythm on the cobblestones. Hastings, posing as his assistant, carried a leather notebook, scribbling observations to maintain their cover. Yusuf's stall was a riot of color. Jars of sumac and cumin stacked like a painter's palette. The merchant himself, a wiry man with a beard like spun silver, eyed them warily as Poirot approached, offering a polite bow. "Salam, Effendi," Poirot said, his accent flawless. "I seek rare spices for a discerning client. Perhaps you have something unique." Yusuf's eyes flickered, assessing. "Spices, yes, but unique. That depends on what you truly seek, monsieur." Poirot leaned closer, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "The serpent's signal. A name that carries weight in certain circles, none." The merchant's hand paused over a jar of saffron, his expression unreadable. "Dangerous words for a stranger. Who sent you?" "A friend from the sands," Poirot replied, sliding a folded note across the counter, a cipher from the Cairo dossier, proving their knowledge. "We seek only to understand the currents of this city." Yusuf pocketed the note, his voice low. "Meet me at the Suleimani Mosque at dusk. Come alone. The serpent's signal is not for the careless." As they left the stall, Hastings muttered, "He didn't even blink. Are we sure he's not leading us into a trap?" "Everything in Istanbul is a trap, Hastings," Poirot said, his eyes scanning the crowd. "But traps reveal truths. We shall meet Yusuf, but we shall not be alone." Dusk painted the Suleimani Mosque in shades of gold and indigo, its minarets piercing the twilight sky. The courtyard was quiet, save for the soft murmur of worshippers and the rustle of pigeons. Poirot, now in a simple robe to blend with the crowd, stood near a marble fountain, his eyes fixed on the mosque's arched entrance. Hastings, positioned discreetly across the courtyard, watched for trouble, his hand resting on the revolver hidden beneath his jacket. Yusuf emerged from the shadows, his face half-lit by a lantern. "Your punctual antiquarian," he said, his tone laced with suspicion. "The serpent's signal is a coda series of lantern flashes from the Galata Tower each night. It guides couriers to safe houses. Tonight's signal points to a hammam in Beyoğlu. But beware the agent you seek trusts no one. And this agent's name," Poirot pressed, his voice calm but unyielding. Yusuf hesitated, then whispered, "Kemal. He serves the crown but answers to another. You'll find him at the hammam, but he's a ghost. Good luck, Effendi." As Yusuf vanished into the crowd, a sudden shout broke the silence. 3 men, their faces obscured by scarves, surged toward Poirot, knives glinting in the lamplight. Instinct took over. Poirot sidestepped, his cane cracking against a wrist, sending a blade clattering. Hastings fired a warning shot, scattering the attackers into the night. "Mon Dieu," Poirot panted, adjusting his robe. "Camel's reach is long. We must move quickly, Hastings." Behamam in Bioclu was a steamy labyrinth of marble and mosaic, its air thick with eucalyptus and the low hum of conversation. Poirot and Hastings, posing as weary travelers, paid for entry and slipped into the baths, their eyes scanning the steam for their quarry. Kemal, the dossier suggested, was a master of disguise. His loyalty to British intelligence a facade for his true allegiance to the Big Four in the main chamber. Men lounged on heated stone, their voices echoing off tiled walls. Poirot's sharp gaze caught a figure in the corner, a man with a hawkish nose and a scar above his brow, his movements too deliberate for a casual bather. "Kemal," Poirot whispered to Hastings, nodding toward the man. "Observe his hands too. Steady, to controlled. He is our serpent." Their approach was cautious, weaving through the steam. Poirot struck up a conversation with a nearby merchant, using the distraction to edge closer to Kemal. "A fine evening for cleansing the soul." "None," he said loudly, his words carrying a double meaning. Kemal's eyes flicked toward him, a predator sizing up prey. "Some stains don't wash away, Effendi," he replied, his voice smooth but cold. Before Poirot could respond, a scream echoed from the women's section. "A diversion," Kemal bolted, slipping through a side door. Poirot and Hastings followed, plunging into a maze of service corridors. The chase was relentless, their footsteps pounding against damp stone. Kemal was fast, but Poirot's mind was faster, anticipating turns and dead ends. They cornered him in a storage room, surrounded by stacks of towels and copper urns. "You're out of your depth, little man," Kemal sneered, drawing a concealed pistol. "The Big Four see everything." Poirot's smile was icy. "And yet, monsieur, it is you who are seen. Drop the weapon, or my friend's aim will prove less forgiving than mine." Hastings' revolver steady, stepped forward. Kemal hesitated, then lowered his pistol, his shoulders slumping. "You'll never stop them," he spat. "Number one is untouchable." "Perhaps," Poirot said, binding Kemal's wrists with a cord from his pocket. "But you, monsieur, will talk." Interrogation took place in a safe house near the Bosphorus, a crumbling apartment overlooking the water. Kemal, stripped of his bravado, revealed fragments of the plot under Poirot's relentless questioning. The Serpent's signal was a communication network, relaying orders from the first member of the Big Four to agents across Europe and Asia. Their goal, to sabotage peace talks in Istanbul, plunging the region into conflict to weaken global alliances. A dossier, hidden in a mosque's minaret, contained names and plans proof of the conspiracy. Poirot and Hastings moved at dawn, scaling the minaret of a lesser-known mosque in Fatih under cover of fog. The dossier, sealed in a tin box, was a goldmine. Coded messages, agent aliases, and a chilling reference to a meeting in Tokyo. The second member, Poirot mused, deciphering the code with a pocket cipher wheel. He moves to surveillance. Now, a web to ensnare the world's leaders. We must follow Hastings. But the victory was short-lived. As they descended, a ferry on the Bosphorus exploded in a fireball, a distraction orchestrated by the Big Four's agents. In the chaos, Kimor escaped his bindings, vanishing into the city. Poirot's face darkened as he watched the flames from the shore. The serpent slips away, but the trail is clear. To Tokyo, mon ami. The train to Tokyo was a rattling beast, its compartments filled with merchants and diplomats. Poirot sat by the window, the dossier open on his lap, his mind a whirl of connections. Hastings, nursing a bruised hand from the hammam chase, watched him. "Do you think Kemmel was telling the truth about number one?" "Truth is a mosaic, Hastings," Poirot said, his eyes distant. "Kemal gave us pieces, but the full picture eludes us. The Big Four are a hydra cut one head, and another grows. Tokyo holds the next clue, and we must be ready." As the train sped east, the Bosphorus faded into memory, its betrayal a stark reminder of the stakes. The game was far from over, and Poirot's little grey cells burned with resolve. Chapter 10. The Tokyo Enigma. Neon-lit streets of Tokyo pulsed with a frenetic energy, a kaleidoscope of signs in kanji and katakana, casting their glow on the rain-slicked pavement. It was a late spring evening in 1925, the air heavy with the scent of cherry blossoms and street food, yakitori grilling over open coals, the temps of soy sauce mingling with the damp. Hercule Poirot, dressed in a tailored suit that somehow maintained its crispness despite the humidity, navigated the crowded alleys of Shinjuku with a purposeful stride. His silver-tipped cane clicked against the stones, a metronome in the city's chaotic symphony. Captain Hastings trailed close behind, his tie loosened, his face flushed from the heat and the disorienting whirl of Tokyo's nightlife. "Poirot," Hastings muttered, dodging a group of laughing salarymen. "This place is a labyrinth. How are we supposed to find anything in this madness?" Poirot's mustache twitched, a faint smile playing beneath it. "Mon ami, the chaos, it is merely a facade. Beneath Tokyo's clamor lies order, method puzzle waiting for the little gray cells to unravel. We seek a syndicate, a technological empire tied to the second member of the Big Four. And here, in this city of light and shadow, we shall find it." Their journey to Tokyo had been spurred by a lead from Istanbul, where Poirot had uncovered Pei, a double agent and a dossier pointing to a high-tech operation in Japan. The second member, the tech magnate who had slipped through Poirot's grasp in New York, was now orchestrating a surveillance network capable of monitoring global leaders. The dossier mentioned a secretive lab in Shinjuku, hidden within a sprawling electronics district, and a single name, Koroi Sum the Black Claw. Poirot suspected this was the code name for the magnate's latest venture, a front for the Big Four's ambitions. Their first stop was a narrow tea house tucked between a pachinko parlor and a noodle stall, its sliding doors adorned with delicate rice paper. Poirot, posing as Henry Dupont, a Belgian investor in cutting-edge technology, had secured a meeting with a low-level operative named Hiroshi Tanaka, rumored to have ties to the syndicate. The tea-house was dimly lit, its air thick with the aroma of matcha and sandalwood incense. Poirot and Hastings knelt on tatami mats, their shoes left at the entrance. As a kimono-clad server poured steaming tea, Poirot, Hastings whispered, shifting uncomfortably, "Are you sure about this? This Tanaka fellow could be a dead end." "Patience, Hastings," Poirot replied, his voice low. "Every thread, no matter how small, weaves the tapestry of truth. Tanaka, he knows more than he believes he knows." The door slid open, and a wiry man in a Western-style suit entered, his glasses reflecting the lantern's glow. Tanaka's movements were jittery, his eyes darting to the corners of the room as if expecting ambush. He bowed slightly, then sat across from Poirot, his hands clasped tightly. "Monsieur Dupont," Tanaka said, his English halting but precise. "You seek investment opportunities, yes. My employers, they are selective. What is your interest?" Poirot's smile was disarming, his accent deliberately thickened. "Monsieur Tanaka, I am a man of vision, drawn to innovation. I hear whispers of a group Koroi soon, perhaps, creating wonders in surveillance, technology that sees all, hears all. Such a venture, it intrigues me." Tanaka's face paled, his fingers tightening around his teacup. "Kuroi Sume's a rumor, a ghost story in the tech world. My employers deal in radios, cameras, nothing more. Ghosts, they leave footprints," Poirot said, his tone light but his eyes piercing. "And I, Henry Dupont, have a nose for such tracks. Tell me, where might I find these radios?" Tanaka hesitated, then slid a folded piece of paper across the table. "A trade show, tomorrow night, in Kabukicho. My employers will be there, showcasing their work. But be careful, monsieur. Some doors once opened do not close." As Tanaka rose to leave, Poirot's hand shot out, grasping his wrist gently but firmly. "One question, Monsieur Tanaka. Have you heard of the Big Four?" Tanaka froze, his eyes wide with fear. He yanked his arm free and fled, the door slamming shut behind him. Hastings stared after him, bewildered. What was that about, Poirot? He looked like he'd seen a ghost. "Nan, Hastings," Poirot said, unfolding the paper. It bore an address and a time: Kabukicho Trade Hall, 8 p.m. He has seen the shadow of the Big Four, and it terrifies him. This trade show, it is our next move. The following evening, Kabukicho buzzed with a frenetic energy, its streets a riot of color and sound. Neon signs advertised hostess clubs, buyers, while hawkers peddled everything from sake to knock-off watches. The trade hall was a sleek, modern building, its glass facade a stark contrast to the district's gritty charm. Poirot, still as Henry Dupont, flashed a forged invitation at the entrance, his charm disarming the burly guards. Hastings, in a borrowed suit that felt too tight, followed, his eyes scanning the crowd. The hall was packed with Japan's tech elite engineers, entrepreneurs, and foreign investors mingling under chandeliers that mimicked cherry blossoms. Booths displayed radios, gramophones, and prototype cameras. But Poirot's attention was drawn to a curtained-off section marked Curoi Sum Innovations, a sleek device, resembling a typewriter crossed with a telegraph, sat on a pedestal, its wires gleaming like veins. "That," Poirot whispered, "is no mere radio. It is a listening device, capable of intercepting signals across continents." The Big Four's eyes and ears. Before Hastings could reply, a man approached, his suit immaculate, his smile predatory. "Monsieur Dupont, I presume," he said, his voice smooth as silk. "I am Kenji Sato, director of Kuroi Sum. Tanaka spoke highly of your interest." Poirot bowed slightly, his eyes never leaving Sato's. "Monsieur Sato, your work is most impressive. This device, it could change the world." "None." Sato's smile widened, but his eyes were cold. "It could, indeed, but such power requires discretion. Join me in our private suite, and we can discuss terms." Poirot nodded, gesturing for Hastings to follow. The suite was a stark contrast to the hall's opulencer, sterile room with steel walls, dominated by a massive console bristling with dials and screens. Sato locked the door behind them, his demeanor shifting from cordial to commanding. "You're no investor, Monsieur Dupont," Sato said, his voice low. "You're Hercule Poirot, and you're meddling in affairs beyond your grasp." Hastings tensed, his hand inching toward his pocket, but Poirot remained calm, his mustache twitching. "Monsieur Sato, you are well informed. But tell me, are you the second of the Big Four, or merely their servant?" Sato laughed, a sharp, mirthless sound. "You think you can bait me? The Big Four are untouchable, Poirot. This lab, this city, it's a cog in their machine. Bow, and you're a pest, soon to be crushed." Before Poirot could respond, the lights flickered, and the room plunged into darkness. A low hum filled the air, followed by the soft click of footsteps. Hastings drew his revolver, but Poirot grabbed his arm. "Nan Hastings, this is no ordinary ambush." When the lights returned, Sato was gone, the console's screens dark. A single note lay on the table, written in precise kanji. "The Black Claw sees all. Cape Town awaits." Poirot's eyes narrowed as he pocketed the note. "The magnate escapes again, but he leaves a trail. Cape Town our next battlefield." The night took a darker turn as Poirot and Hastings left the trade hall, only to find themselves tailed by shadowy figures in black suits. The streets of Kabukicho, once vibrant, now felt like a trap. Poirot led the way, his cane tapping a rapid rhythm as they ducked into an alley lined with izakayas. The pursuers followed, their movements silent, their intent clear. Poirot Hastings hissed, "They're closing in. We can't outrun them." "Then we outthink them," Poirot replied, spotting a narrow staircase leading to a rooftop bar. They climbed, the sounds of pursuit growing closer. The rooftop was crowded, its patrons oblivious to the drama unfolding. Poirot scanned the area, his eyes landing on a fire escape leading to an adjacent building. "Quickly, Hastings," he urged, leading the way. The fire escape groaned under their weight, But they reached the next roof just as their pursuers emerged. The men, now visible in the neon glow, wore masks resembling no theater demons, their eyes glinting with malice. Poirot and Hastings sprinted across the rooftops, leaping narrow gaps between buildings. The pursuers were relentless, their movements eerily coordinated, as if guided by an unseen hand. Poirot spotted a construction site below, its cranes and scaffolding offering cover. "There, mon ami," he shouted, pointing to a rope dangling. From a crane, they slid down, landing in a maze of steel beams and wooden planks. The pursuers followed, but Poirot had a plan. He grabbed a loose plank, wedging it into a gap between beams, creating a makeshift barrier. As the men approached, he kicked a barrel of nails, sending them scattering across the ground. The pursuers stumbled, cursing in Japanese, giving Poirot and Hastings time to slip into the shadows. They emerged in a quiet street near Shinjuku Station, their breaths ragged. "That was too close," Hastings panted. "Who were those men?" "Ninja," Poirot said, his voice grim. "Or their modern equivalent, trained by the Big Four. They protect the syndicate, and they know we are a threat." Determined to strike back, Poirot returned to the tea-house the next day, seeking Tanaka. The man was there, hunched over a cup, Bof's sake, his face drawn. "You shouldn't have come back," Tanaka whispered. "They're watching you." "Then tell me where to find them," Poirot said, his tone unyielding. "The lab, Tanaka. Where is it?" Tanaka hesitated, then scribbled an address on a napkin. "Asakusa District. Warehouse 47. It's hidden beneath a fish market. But you'll need a key card. Sato keeps it on him." Poirot nodded, slipping Tanaka a few yen notes. "You have done well, monsieur. Now, disappear. The Black Claw has long talons." That night, Poirot and Hastings infiltrated the Asakusa fish market, its air thick with the briny scent of tuna and mackerel. Warehouse 47 was a hulking structure, its doors guarded by two men in black suits. Poirot, using a distraction, a crate of fish, accidentally toppled by a bribed vendor's, lipped past with Hastings, picking the lock on a side entrance. Inside, the warehouse was a front, its upper level filled with crates of fish. A hidden elevator, accessed with a stolen keycard from one of Sato's men, descended into a subterranean lab. The space was a marvel of technology: worry machines, glowing screens, and a central console linked to a global map. Red dots pulsing in capitals from London to Washington. "This," Poirot said, his voice hushed, "is the heart of their surveillance. Every conversation, every secret, captured and relayed to the Big Four." Hastings, awestruck, approached the console, only to trigger an alarm. Red lights flashed, and steel shutters slammed down, sealing the exits. By from the shadows, Sato emerged, flanked by the masked men from the rooftop chase. "You're persistent, Poirot," he said, a katana gleaming in his hand. "But this is where your meddling ends." Poirot, undaunted, stepped forward. "Monsieur Sato, you underestimate the little gray cells. Your machine, it is magnificent, but it has a arrogance. You believe it untouchable, yet here I stand. Sato lunged, his blade flashing, but Poirot sidestepped, using his cane to parry the blow. Hastings fired his revolver, forcing the masked men to scatter. The lab became a battlefield, sparks flying as bullets struck machinery. Poirot, with a dexterity born of desperation, grabbed a wrench and smashed the console's core, sending sparks cascading. The map flickered, then went dark. Sato roared, charging again. But Poirot tripped him with his cane, sending him crashing into a server rack. The masked men hesitated, then fled as sirens wailed in the distanced Tokyo's police, alerted by the alarm. Poirot and Hastings escaped through a ventilation shaft, emerging in the fish market as dawn broke over the city. Back at their hotel, Poirot examined the note from the trade hall. Cape Town awaits. The lab was destroyed, but Sato had escaped, and the Big Four's network remained intact. "We have struck a blow, Hastings," Poirot said, his voice weary but resolute. "But the war continues. Cape Town is our next move, and there we shall find the next piece of this enigma." As they boarded a steamer for South Africa, Poirot's mind churned. The Tokyo lab had revealed the scale of the Big Four's ambitions, a world under their watchful eye, but it had also exposed their fears. They knew Poirot was closing in, and in Cape Town he vowed to tighten the noose. The game was far from over, but Hercule Poirot played to win. Chapter 11. The Diamond Deception. The sun blazed over Cape Town, its light glinting off the Table Mountain's flat summit like a blade. Hercule Poirot stepped off the steamer onto the bustling docks of the Victoria and Alfred waterfront, his impeccable suit a stark contrast to the salt-stained sailors and merchants around him. The air carried the tang of fish, tar, and the faint sweetness of blooming jacarandas. Captain Hastings, at his side, adjusted his hat against the glare. Clutching a leather case containing the Tokyo dossier, ledger of coded transactions that had led them here, to the heart of a diamond smuggling ring funding the Big Four's global schemes, the financier, the second member of the shadowy quartet, was orchestrating this operation, funneling blood diamonds to fuel their chaos. Cape Town, with its glittering wealth and shadowed underbelly, was the perfect stage for such a deception. Poirot's grey eyes swept the docks, cataloguing every face, every movement. "Mon ami," he said, his voice low but resonant. "This city is a paradox beauty atop a mountain of greed. The financier hides here, weaving his web of diamonds and deceit. We must tread lightly, for the ground beneath us is treacherous." Hastings frowned, glancing at the dossier's cryptic notes. The ledger mentioned a diamond veil, a code for the smuggling ring, perhaps. But how do we find one man in a city this size? Poirot's moustache twitched, a spark of anticipation in his gaze. "We do not find him, Hastings. We let him reveal himself. The diamond veil is no mere phrase, it is a network, and every network has a weak link. We shall start with the docks, where whispers travel faster than the wind." Their first lead came from the Tokyo dossier, a name Vander Merwe, a diamond broker rumored to be the financier's front in Cape Town. The docks were alive with activity, crates of wine, wool, and contraband shifted under the watchful eyes of customs officers, some of whom, Poirot suspected, were on the financier's payroll. Disguised as Belgian gem traders, Poirot and Hastings navigated the chaos. Their forged papers identifying them as Henry Dupont and Arthur Wells. Their search led them to a weathered tavern near the waterfront, its walls stained with salt and smoke. Inside, sailors and traders swapped stories over tankards of ale, their voices a rough symphony of Afrikaans, English, and Kosa. Poirot, his accent honed to a Flemish lilt, approached the bar where a burly man with a scarred cheek presided. "A fine day for trade," Monsieur Poirot said, sliding a coin across the counter. "We seek a man of influence, Vander Merwe. Word is, he deals in stones that sparkle brighter than most." The barkeep's eyes narrowed, his hand pausing over a glass. "Vander Merwe don't meet strangers. You got a name?" "Dupont," Poirot replied smoothly. "My associate and I represent buyers with particular tastes." The barkeep grunted, then jerked his head toward a back room. "Wait there. Someone'll find you." In the dimly lit room, a woman appeared, her auburn hair pinned beneath a veiled hat. Her eyes, sharp as cut sapphire, sized them up. "I'm Elise," she said, her accent clipped with traces of Dutch. "Vander Merwe sent me. What do you want?" Poirot's smile was disarming. "Diamonds, mademoiselle. Not the polished baubles of De Beers, but those with a rougher provenance. We hear Vander Merwe is the man to see." Elise's lips curled, a predator's smile. "You're bold, Dupont. Meet me at the Castle of Good Hope tomorrow at noon. Bring proof of funds. Vander Merwe doesn't waste time." As she left, Hastings whispered, "She's part of it, isn't she?" The way she moved calculated. "Precisement," Poirot murmured. "She is a gatekeeper, but not the financier. We follow her, and she will lead us closer to our quarry." The Castle of Good Hope, a star-shaped fortress of sandstone, loomed under the noon sun. Its walls, built by Dutch colonists, whispered of centuries of secrets. Poirot and Hastings, carrying a satchel of forged banknotes, met Elise in the courtyard, where tourists mingled with hawkers selling beaded trinkets. Elise led them to a private chamber, its walls lined with faded tapestry. There Vander Merwe awaited a portly man with a waxed moustache and eyes like polished obsidian. "You claim to be buyers," Vander Merwe said, his voice smooth but laced with suspicion. "Show me your worth." Poirot opened the satchel, revealing stacks of notes, enough to buy silence as well as stones. "Monsieur." Vander Merwe's laugh was a low rumble. "Silence is expensive in Cape Town. The Diamond Veil deals only with those who understand its rules. Tonight there's a shipment at the old diamond mine in Kimberley. Be there and we'll talk." As they left the castle, Hastings muttered, "Kimberley's hours away. This feels like a setup." "It is," Poirot said, his eyes gleaming. "But a setup reveals as much as it conceals. We go to Kimberley Hastings, and we prepare for the unexpected. The journey to Kimberley was a grueling trek through the arid Karoo, the train rattling across a landscape of scrub and stone. Poirot, ever fastidious, adjusted his cuffs, his mind racing through the dossier's clues. The diamond veil was a smuggling ring, funneling blood diamonds from conflict zones to the Big Four's coffers. The financier, elusive as ever, oversaw the operation from afar, using van der Merwe as a pawn. But the mine, Poirot suspected, was more than a transfer point. It was a stage for the financier's next move. Kimberley's diamond mine, a gaping wound in the earth known as the Big Hole, was a relic of greed. Its depths long exhausted, but its tunnels still used by those who traded in shadows. At midnight, Poirot and Hastings, now in rough miner's gear, approached the mine's entrance, guided by Elise's instructions. The air was thick with dust, the silence broken only by the distant howl of a jackal. Inside, the tunnels were a maze of damp stone and flickering lanterns. Van der Merwe waited in a cavernous chamber, crates of rough diamonds stacked around him. "You're punctual," he said, his tone mocking. "But are you clever enough to survive the veil?" Before Poirot could reply, a low rumble shook the tunnel. Dust rained from the ceiling, and shouts echoed from deeper within. "A trap," Hastings hissed, drawing his revolver. "None, mon ami," Poirot said, his voice calm. "A test." From the shadows emerged a figure tall, lean, with a face obscured by a miner's scarf. The financier's voice, cultured and cold, cut through the din. "You're persistent, little detective, but you're meddling in affairs beyond your grasp." Poirot's eyes locked onto the man's. "Affairs of greed, monsieur, or of power. The diamond veil funds your masters, but it is you who stands before me now. Speak, or the game ends here." The financier laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "You think you can stop us? The Big Four are eternal. These diamonds are but a means to an ender new order." The standoff was interrupted by a second rumble, this one deliberate. Explosives, set by the financier's men, collapsed a nearby tunnel, trapping them in the chamber. Dust choked the air, and Van der Merwe, panicking, lunged for a crate, only to be felled by a falling rock. The financier, seizing the chaos, slipped toward a side tunnel. Poirot, undeterred, grabbed Hastings. After him, the ledger is our proof. The chase was a desperate scramble through collapsing tunnels, the financier's silhouette always just ahead. They emerged into the night, the big hole yawning below. The financier, cornered at the edge, turned, his scarf falling to reveal a face Hastings recognized from Paris, the same charismatic financier. "Now unmasked, you'll never hold me," he sneered, tossing a satchel of diamonds into the abyss. "The Big Four will rise again." But Poirot had anticipated this. A whistle from his pocket summoned local police, tipped off by a telegram sent before their journey. The financier fought his strength surprising, but he was overpowered, bound, and led away. As dawn broke, Poirot recovered a second ledger from the chamber, its pages detailing shipments to Buenos Aires. "The first member," he said, his voice grim. "He moves now, inciting chaos in the New World. We sail for Argentina, Hastings." The steamer to Buenos Aires awaited, its horn a call to the next battle. Poirot stood at the rail, the ledger in hand, his mind already unraveling the next thread. In the Big Four's web. Cape Town's diamonds had glittered with deception, but the truth, as always, lay in the little grey cells. Chapter 12. The Buenos Aires blitz. The sultry air of Buenos Aires thrummed with the pulse of tango, its streets alive with the clink of wine glasses and the laughter of late-night revelers. It was a sweltering February evening in 1926, the height of summer in the southern hemisphere, and the city's vibrant energy seemed to mask a deeper undercurrent of intrigue. Hercule Poirot, impeccably dressed in a lightweight linen suit, his mustache waxed to perfection despite the humidity, navigated the cobblestone alleys of San Telmo with a purposeful gait. His silver-tipped cane tapped a steady rhythm, a counterpoint to the distant strains of a bandoneon. Captain Hastings, his face flushed from the heat, followed closely, his eyes darting to the shadows cast by flickering gaslights. "Poirot," Hastings said, mopping his brow with a handkerchief, "this city feels like a fever dream. How do you stay so cool? And how are we supposed to find the first member of the Big Four in this chaos?" Poirot's green eyes gleamed beneath the brim of his Panama hat. "Mon ami, the heat, it is merely a distraction. Buenos Aires, it is a stage, and the first member of the Big Four plays a starring role as a revolutionary leader. We must find the script and the little grey cells. They shall direct the scene." Their journey to Buenos Aires had been spurred by a lead from Cape Town, where Poirot had dismantled a diamond smuggling ring tied to the financier of the Big Four. A coded message, hidden in a blood diamond, pointed to a revolutionary movement in Argentina, orchestrated by the first member, a chameleon-like figure who had evaded Poirot in Vienna and Paris. The message mentioned a plaza, a speech, and a name, El Cuervo, the Raven. Poirot suspected this was the code name for the first member, now inciting chaos in South America to destabilize governments and pave the way for the Big Four's global schemes. Their first stop was a smoky tango hall, La Milonga, the Las Sombras, nestled in a crumbling colonial building, its faded grandeur peeling paint, gilded mirrors clouded with age, a reputation as a meeting place for radicals and spies. Poirot, posing as Henry Dupont, a Belgian philanthropist funding cultural preservation, had secured an introduction to a local journalist, Sophia Morales, rumored to have contacts within the revolutionary underground. The hall was packed, couples gliding across the floor in a dance that was both sensual and defiant, their movements mirroring the city's restless spirit. "Poirot," Hastings whispered, adjusting his tie. "This place feels like a powder keg. One wrong move, and we're done for." "Calm, Hastings," Poirot murmured, his eyes scanning the dancers. "The tango, it is a conversation, a duel of trust and betrayal. We shall join the dance, but with words, not steps. Sophia Morales arrived, a striking woman with dark eyes and a cascade of black hair. Her dress a vivid crimson that stood out against the hall's muted tones. She slid into their booth, her gaze appraising. "Senna Dupont," she said, her voice low and musical. "You wish to preserve our culture, yet you ask about El Corvo. Why does a philanthropist chase revolutionaries?" Poirot's smile was disarming, his accent deliberately softened. "Mademoiselle Morales, culture and politics, they are intertwined. None. I hear whispers of a man called El Corvo, stirring the people with promises of change. Such passion, it intrigues me. Where might I hear him speak?" Sophia's eyes narrowed, but she leaned closer, her voice barely audible over the music. "El Corvo is a ghost, Senna. He speaks in the plazas, in the shadows, never twice in the same place. Tomorrow at Plaza Dorrego, there's a rally. He might appear. But be warned, his followers are loyal, and they trust no outsiders." She slipped a folded flyer into Poirot's hand, its edges worn, printed with fiery rhetoric about liberty, ban justice. As she rose to leave, Poirot's hand brushed hers, a subtle gesture, one question. "Mademoiselle, have you heard of the Big Four?" Sophia froze, her expression flickering with unease. "A myth," she said quickly, then vanished into the crowd, her crimson dress a fleeting flame among the dancers. Hastings frowned, unfolding the flyer. "She knows something, Poirot. And that name, Corvo, it's the same rook symbol from London, isn't it?" "Oui," Poirot said, his fingers tracing the flyer's text. "The raven, the rook there, one and the same. The first member hides behind this mask, and tomorrow we shall see his face." The next evening, Plaza Dorrego was a sea of fervor, its cobblestones packed with workers, students, and agitators waving red and black banners. Torches cast flickering shadows, and a wooden platform stood at the plaza center, draped with slogans demanding revolution. Poirot and Hastings, dressed as local journalists, blended into the crowd, their press badges forged with the help of a discreet printer. The air was thick with anticipation, the chant of El Corvo rising like a heartbeat. Poirot's eyes scanned the platform, where a man in a dark cloak emerged, his face partially hidden by a wide-brimmed hat. His voice, when he spoke, was a thunderclap, resonating with a charisma that silenced the crowd. "People of Argentina," he declared, "the chains of the elite bind us, but we shall break them. The future is ours, forged in fire and blood." The crowd roared, but Poirot's attention was elsewhere. At the platform's edge, a woman in a hooded cloak watched, her posture tense, her hand resting on a concealed weapon. "There," Poirot whispered to Hastings, "she is his shadow, his protector, and perhaps his weakness." As El Corvo's speech reached its climax, promising a new dawn for the oppressed, Poirot slipped through the crowd, his cane tapping. Lightly, he approached the woman, his voice low and polite. "Senora, a moment. I am a friend of liberty, seeking El Corvo's wisdom." Her eyes, sharp as a hawk's, fixed on him. "You're no friend," she hissed, her hand inching toward her belt. "Leave, or you'll regret it." Before Poirot could respond, a commotion erupted at the plaza's edge. A group of mounted police charged, their sabers gleaming, scattering the crowd. El Corvo vanished into the chaos, his cloak a dark blur. The woman drew a pistol, but Poirot grabbed her wrist, twisting it with surprising strength. The gun clattered to the ground, and she fled, leaving behind a locket engraved with a rook symbol. "Quickly, Hastings!" Poirot shouted, pocketing the locket as they dodged fleeing protesters. They ducked into an alley, the sounds of hooves and shouts fading behind them. Poirot examined the locket, its interior revealing a tiny photograph of a man with piercing eyes. The same man from the platform. "He's our man," Hastings said, panting. "But where did he go?" Poirot's eyes gleamed. "To a safe house, mon ami. The locket, it is a key, and it will lead us to him." The locket's photograph bore a faint address scratched into its frame. Cale Defensor. No, 23. The safe house was a nondescript tenement, its facade crumbling, its windows dark. Poirot and Hastings approached under cover of night, the city's revelry a distant hum. The door was locked, but Poirot's nimble fingers made short work of it, his lockpicks a silent ally. Inside, the air was stale. The rooms cluttered with revolutionary pamphlets and maps of South America, red pins marking key cities. A hidden door behind a bookshelf led to a basement, where a single lantern illuminated a table strewn with documents. El Corvo stood there, his cloak discarded, his face now visible a man of 40, with sharp features and a scar across his cheek. "You are persistent, Monsieur Poirot," he said, his voice calm but laced with menace. "But you've walked into a trap." The door slammed shut, and 3 armed men emerged from the shadows, their rifles trained on Poirot and Hastings. Hastings reached for his revolver, but Poirot raised a hand. "Non-Hastings. Let us speak, not fight." El Corvo laughed, a cold, hollow sound. "Speak. You think words will save you. The Big Four have plans. Poirot and you are a minor inconvenience." "Then why the trap?" Poirot asked, his tone mild. "If I am so insignificant, why fear Hercule Poirot?" El Corvo's smile faltered, and in that moment Poirot acted. He flicked his cane, its hidden blade slicing through a rope tied to a chandelier above. The fixture crashed down, scattering the gunmen. Hastings tackled one, while Poirot dove for cover, grabbing a map from the table as bullets flew. The basement erupted into chaos, but Poirot's mind remained clear. He spotted a gas lamp, its flame flickering. With a swift motion, he knocked it over, igniting a stack of pamphlets. Smoke billowed, and the gunman faltered, coughing. Poirot and Hastings scrambled up the stairs, emerging into the night as the safe house began to burn. They ran the city's labyrinthine streets, swallowing them. Behind, the fire grew, drawing shouts and sirens. Poirot clutched the map, its edges singed, revealing a coded message. "Geneva, the chateau. The 4th awaits. We've got him. Poirot. Hastings panted, exhilarated. El Cuvos finished. None. Poirot said, his voice grim. He escaped, but the Mappet is his undoing. The first member is unmasked, but the Big Four remain. Geneva is our final stage, Hastings, and there we shall face the heart of this shadow war. The next morning, Poirot and Hastings boarded a steamer for Europe, the map safely tucked in Poirot's pocket. El Curvo, revealed as Diego Salazar, a former Spanish diplomat turned revolutionary, was a master manipulator, but his arrogance had cost him. The fire had destroyed his safe house, but Poirot knew he would regroup, likely in Geneva with the mysterious fourth member, as the ship cut through the Atlantic. Poirot studied the map, its codes pointing to a fortified chateau in the Swiss Alps. The fourth member, the genius behind the Big Four, was within reach, but so was danger. Salazar's trap had been a close call, and Poirot suspected a traitor still lurked, feeding information to their enemies. Hastings, he said, gazing at the horizon in Buenos Aires. We danced the tango of danger, and we survived. In Geneva, we must be more than survivors. We must be victors. Hastings nodded, his resolve firm. We'll get them, Poirot. All of them. The steamer's horn sounded, and Poirot's thoughts turned to Geneva. The Buenos Aires blitz had exposed the Big Four's audacity, but it had also shown their desperation. The game was nearing its end, and Hercule Poirot was ready to checkmate. Chapter 13. The Geneva Gambit. The Swiss Alps loomed like silent sentinels, their snow-capped peaks piercing a sky of crystalline blue. Geneva, nestled at the edge of its shimmering lake, was a city of serene elegance, its cobbled streets and grand hetels masking the currents of intrigue that swirled beneath. It was March 1926, and the air carried a crisp bite, a reminder of winter's lingering grasp. Hercule Poirot, clad in a tailored wool overcoat, his moustache immaculate despite the alpine chill, stood on the balcony of a discreet pension overlooking Lake Geneva. His silver-tipped cane rested against the railing, and his green eyes scanned the distant horizon, where a fortified chateau crouched atop a rocky crag. Captain Hastings, bundled in a scarf and greatcoat, joined him, his breath fogging in the cold. Poirot, Hastings said, rubbing his hands together. That chateau looks like something out of a Gothic novel. Are you sure it's the heart of the Big Four's operation? It seems too obvious. Poirot's lips curved in a faint smile. Mon ami, the obvious, it is often the most cunning disguise. The fourth member of the Big Four, this genius of chaos, chooses a fortress not for its secrecy, but for its defiance. They believe themselves untouchable, and in Geneva we shall prove them wrong. Their journey to Geneva had been the culmination of a global chase, sparked by a singed map recovered from a burning safe house in Buenos Aires. The map's codes pointed to this chateau, a stronghold tied to the elusive fourth member of the Big Four, a reclusive mastermind orchestrating economic turmoil on a global scale. Poirot had faced the other three members, the diplomat in Vienna and Paris, the financier in Rio and Cape Town, and the warlord's successors in Shanghai and Moscow. Each had been a piece of the puzzle, but the fourth, known only as La Phantom, was the architect of their schemes. The map suggested a war room within the chateau, where plans to collapse markets and ignite wars were nearing fruition. Their first move was a visit to a quaint café near the jet d'eau, its terrace offering a view of the lake and the city's diplomatic quarter. Poirot, posing as Henry Dupont, a retired Belgian banker, had arranged to meet a Swiss intelligence officer, Clara Vogel, who had unknowingly crossed paths with the Big Four's agents. The café was warm, its air scented with fresh croissants and espresso, and Poirot sipped his café au lait with an air of calm precision. "Poirot," Hastings whispered, glancing at the door. "How do we know this Vogel isn't one of them? Barstay, after Istanbul. I don't trust anyone. Trust, Hastings, is a luxury we cannot afford," Poirot replied, his voice low. "But knowledge, it is our currency. Mademoiselle Vogel, she knows the chateau's secrets, whether she realizes it or not." Clara Vogel arrived, a tall woman with ash-blonde hair and a nonsense demeanor, her grey suit as sharp as her gaze. She sat, declining coffee, and fixed Poirot with a skeptical look. "Monsieur Dupont," she said, her French flawless, "you claim to be investigating financial irregularities. Why the interest in Chateau de l'Aigle? It's a private estate owned by a recluse named Marcel Laurent." Poirot's eyes twinkled, though his expression remained neutral. "Mademoiselle Vogel, irregularities. They are like ripples on a lake small, but they betray the stone beneath. This Laurent, he is a man of wealth, none, yet he shuns society, hides in his eagle's nest. I wonder what does he conceal?" Clara hesitated, her fingers tapping the table. "Laurent is eccentric. He funds obscure projects, technology, economics, even politics. My office flagged his accounts for suspicious transactions, but we found nothing concrete. The chateau is fortified, guarded by private security. Getting inside is impossible." "Impossible," Poirot mused, "is merely a challenge. Tell me, have you heard whispers of a group called the Big Four?" Clara's face tightened, a flicker of recognition in her eyes. "Rumors, nothing more. A cabal of power brokers, manipulating markets and governments, but no proof exists." She slid a slim dossier across the table. "This is all I have on Laurent. Be careful, monsieur. His reach is long." As she left, Poirot opened the dossier, revealing blueprints of the chateau, financial records, and a grainy photograph of Marcel Laurent, gaunt man with piercing eyes, his face half hidden by a scarf. "This," Poirot said, tapping the photos, "is Le Phantom, the fourth member, unmasked at last." The chateau, perched on a cliff overlooking the Rhine Valley, was a fortress of stone and steel, its turrets bristling with modern defenses. Poirot and Hastings spent the day reconnaissance, posing as tourists hiking the Alpine trails. The chateau perimeter was patrolled by armed guards, their uniforms unmarked, and surveillance cameras cutting edge for 1926 wept the grounds. A hidden entrance, noted in Clara's blueprints, lay beneath a waterfall, accessible only by a narrow ledge. That night, under a moonless sky, Poirot and Hastings approached the waterfall, their boots crunching on frost-slicked rock. Poirot, with a dexterity belying his fastidious nature, led the way, his cane hooked to his belt. The roar of the falls masked their movements, but the ledge was treacherous, its surface slick with spray. Hastings, gripping the rock face, muttered, "If we survive this, Poirot, I'm retiring to a quiet cottage." "None, Hastings," Poirot replied, his voice steady despite the peril. "Put the quiet life. It is not for us, not until the Big Four are defeated." They reached the entrance, a steel door concealed by moss. Poirot's lockpicks made quick work of it, and they slipped inside, entering a tunnel lit by flickering electric bulbs. The air was damp, the walls etched with faint carvings, rooks, ravens, symbols of the Big Four's reach. The tunnel led to a vast chamber, its ceiling vaulted like a cathedral, its walls lined with maps and charts. A central table held a model of the world, red pins marking cities from London to Tokyo, each linked by threads representing trade routes and alliances. "This," Poirot whispered, his eyes wide, "is their war room. The Big Four's visioner world remade in their image." Before Hastings could reply, a hidden panel slid open, and Marcel Laurent emerged, flanked by two bodyguards in black tactical gear. His presence was commanding, his voice a silken rasp. "Monsieur Poirot," he said, clapping slowly, "you've come farther than I expected, but this is the end of your chase." Hastings drew his revolver, but Poirot raised a hand, his gaze locked on Laurent. "Monsieur le Fantôme, you are the fourth, the mind behind this chaos. But why? Power, wealth, or something more personal?" Laurent's smile was cold, his eyes glinting like obsidian. "You think in small terms, Poirot. The world is a chessboard, its pieces flawed governments, squabbling, economies teetering. The Big Four, we are the Grand Masters, reshaping the board for order, not chaos. You, with your little grey cells, are a pawn who dares to challenge kings." "Then let us play," Poirot said, his tone deceptively mild. "Your plant to collapse markets, ignite wars, it is bold, but flawed. You underestimate the resilience, poor of humanity." Laurent laughed, gesturing to the maps. "Resilience, humanity is a herd, easily led. Tomorrow we trigger a cascade, stock markets crash, treaties dissolve, and nations turn on each other. You cannot stop it. The bodyguards advance." But Poirot was ready. He flicked his cane, releasing a hidden dart that struck one guard's neck, sending him crumpling. Hastings fired, wounding the second, and they dove behind the table as Laurent drew a pistol. The war room became a battlefield, bullets ricocheting off stone. Poirot, with a speed born of necessity, grabbed a ledger from the table, its pages detailing the financial triggers for Laurent's plan. "Cover me, Hastings," Poirot shouted, sprinting for a control panel on the far wall. He smashed it with his cane, sparking wires and silencing a humming machine linked to global exchanges. Laurent roared, firing wildly, but Poirot ducked, rolling behind a map stand. Hastings, pinned near the model, spotted a gas canister tucked beneath it. "Poirot," he yelled, kicking it toward Laurent. The canister burst, filling the room with choking smoke. Poirot seized the moment, tackling Laurent, his small frame surprisingly strong. They grappled, Laurent's pistol skidding across the floor. Poirot pinned him, his cane pressed against Laurent's throat. "Yield, Monsieur," Poirot panted, "or your game ends here." Laurent's eyes burned with defiance, but he went limp, his strength spent. "You've won a battle, Poirot," he rasped, "but the war, it never ends." Hastings bound Laurent's wrists with a torn map, while Poirot gathered the ledger, buyer, and a coated disc from the control panel. The chateau's alarms wailed, signaling approaching guards. They fled through the tunnel, emerging into the dawn as the waterfall's roar drowned out pursuit. A waiting car, arranged by Clara Vogel, sped them to Geneva's train station, where they boarded a carriage for London. Back in London, spring was stirring, the city's fog giving way to tentative sunlight. Poirot's Baker Street apartment was a haven of order, its shelves lined with books, its fire crackling warmly. He sat at his desk, the ledger and disc before him, while Hastings paced, still buzzing from their escape. "Poirot," Hastings said, "we've got Laurent, but what about the others? The diplomat, the financier, the warlord's heirs there, still out there." Poirot's fingers traced the ledger's entries, his eyes distant. "Nan, Hastings, the big four, they are broken. Laurent was their mind, their strategist. The others, Diogo Salazar, the financier, Irina Volnova, they are scattered, their network in disarray. This ledger, it names their agents, their accounts. The authorities, they will finish what we began." He inserted the disc into a portable cipher machine, a relic from the chateau. Its gears whirred, spitting out a final message. "The rook falls. The game is over." Poirot leaned back, his expression a mix of triumph and weariness. "But is it really over?" Hastings asked, sinking into an armchair. Laurent said the war never ends. Poirot's moustache twitched, a rare vulnerability in his gaze. "The war, it is eternal, mon ami. Chaos, ambition, greed, they are the human condition. But we, with our little grey cells, we hold the line. Today we have won." A knock at the door interrupted them. A messenger delivered a sealed envelope, its paper heavy, unmarked save for a faint rook symbol. Poirot opened it, his eyes narrowing as he read aloud, "Monsieur Poirot, the board is reset. New players await. A friend." Hastings paled, but Poirot's smile was resolute. "Buy a new game, perhaps," he said, tossing the letter into the fire. "But not today. Today we rest." That evening Poirot and Hastings dined at Simpson's in the Strand, a rare indulgence. The roast beef was succulent, the wine rich, and the clink of crystal glasses a soothing counterpoint to their months of peril. Poirot raised his glass, his voice soft but firm. "To order, Hastings," he said, "to method, and to the triumph of the human spirit." Hastings clinked his glass, grinning. "And to you, Poirot, the greatest detective I'll ever know." As they left, the London night was clear, stars piercing the velvet sky. Poirot paused, his cane tapping the pavement, his gaze fixed on the horizon. The Big Four were defeated, their shadow war ended, but the world remained a chessboard, its pieces ever moving. For now, Hercule Poirot was content to step off the board, his victory hard won, his legacy secure.